And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, him.
Attention to roll call.
That's right. Good morning, everybody. 8:05 live Eastern Time. And, of course, it's your Friday roundtable. We're talking about very controversial, the most prolific incident going on in the country right now. I've been saying this for over 3 years at this point. I've said it since the George Floyd riots. The Dems are always looking, and they're seeking for the next George Floyd. This time they found it in a white woman. And what's interesting about that, it seems as though maybe the right, maybe the Republicans are looking as well. I always thought it was just the Democrats, but it seems it fits the narrative, and it definitely assists in fighting logistics, legislation on both sides. So let's get into this. It's a very controversial incident. No loss of life can be glazed over. However, when law enforcement is acting and performing and doing their duties, sometimes it's necessary. So let's get into this, and we will dissect it, and let's get your thoughts. I mean, this is something that everyone in the country is weighing in right now. Police enthusiasts, critics, experts, law enforcement themselves, active and retired. And what I heard particularly from some, especially Rodney Harrison, former NYPD chief, I heard him speak on an interview. And to me, it sounds like he's vying for a job in this administration, pandering to it. Another cowardly move, not surprised. Meanwhile, it comes from the same chief that said Daniel Pantaleo, in his retirement, said that Daniel Pantaleo got a raw deal, but didn't say anything while he was on the job and Daniel Pantaleo got terminated. But now he's vying to this administration. My opinion, maybe he's looking for a job. We heard he was definitely in the lineup, potentially for a police commissioner, and supposedly he wasn't interested. But you'll see some of that video here today, and you'll tell me if he's interested or not. John, Marlon, good morning. Let's jump right into it. John, what are your thoughts?
What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. So, welcome everybody in the chat. And I think you guys should stay tuned because, as usual, here on the Finest Unfiltered, I think we will not be without being name called. And I think we're going to piss basically everybody off because we're just going to break down the facts. So we're going to we're going to piss off the left. We're going to piss off the right. We're going to piss off cops. We're going to piss off police enthusiasts. But at the end of the day, we're just going to talk about the facts, removing our own bias from it and how we see it based on our opinion and our experiences in law enforcement. So obviously a pivotal video comes out. The video shows ICE agents telling a woman to stop her vehicle. Apparently this woman had been antagonizing ICE the entire time out on the street while they were driving around doing their raids. From what we see in the video, it looks as if she attempted to block the road from ICE being allowed to go. And when ICE approaches her, she then moves. Now, the question is, was it her movement in the vehicle an attempt to flee? Was it an attempt to run over an officer? Was the officer who ultimately fired his firearm justified in the fact of firing his firearm, and it cost us her life? So we're going to get in through all of that. We're going to go through the U.S. Department of Justice use of force policy. And so stay tuned. Welcome. I think, this is a very important conversation. And I honestly think, and I'm not just saying this because it's because I'm on the show or Eric's on the show or Marlon's on the show. I don't think you're going to get an analysis like this anywhere else from any other thing. There's going to be no spin, no narrative. We're not trying to push a narrative. We're not celebrating a loss of life of a young woman, a mother. And we're not rah-rah-rahing for ICE or any police department or any cop either. We want everyone to be safe. We want to turn the temperature down, and we want to look at facts, and we don't want to incite this even more. So, what's up, Marlon?
Yeah, good morning, guys. Morning chat. Like John said, happy Friday. Got a great weekend ahead of us. A lot to talk about this. Like John said, I think we have a nuanced perspective on this. I think we have a measured response to it, like everyone should take right now. The one thing people, I keep seeing people get outraged about this, and I gotta say, I'm surprised people aren't like getting tired of being outraged, because we've moved from one protest cause to another for, I think we're almost at 10 years now, I mean,
Yep.
think of it. We went from those kids, like what's the kid in Florida? In the kid in Sanford, Trayvon. Yeah, we went from Trayvon to the kid in Missouri to George Floyd to on and on to Palestine to on and on and on and on and on. So at some point, people have to realize that you have to look at the bigger picture, okay, and not get manipulated by the tactics of politicians and opportunists in the media. You have to look at the situation from a measured perspective and from a logical perspective rather than reacting emotionally. So yeah, we have a great discussion ahead of us, and we always appreciate you guys joining us.
So I think when we talk about assessment and fairness, exactly that. On this platform, I think you're not going to get another perspective in this manner. And we're just talking about the truth and about police interactions. And I know John and I both spoke about this, and we've both been in contact with numerous people. And something that's come up in conversation is, well, you should stick up for things, right? And when to fight back, right? And when you're in a situation with law enforcement, it's not that the law enforcement are dominating you in your life and basically it's dictatorship. That's not the case. But when you're in an encounter with law enforcement, this is the time not to stand on moral principle. This is not the time to be righteous, and this is not the time to decide right and wrong. And I know John and I spoke about this. The question was posed to him about, well, during the vaccine mandate, you stood up on moral principle and fought against it. Why would this be any different? Well, it is very different. When you're in a police encounter, this is not the time, again, to be righteous. It's not about fighting for right and wrong, whether you're right, the police are wrong, or vice versa. If you're in a situation with law enforcement, things are very tense. You're in the street. There's no referee. There's no courtroom. There's no one to interject. And sometimes intentions are distorted. I see some people in chat here saying what the intentions are of this woman. And we understand. And well, we could say it for both ways. What are the intentions of law enforcement, right? Now, ultimately, we trust in our law enforcement, right? So the majority of law enforcement, and I would say it's nearly close to 100%. Of course, there's always a margin of error, have great intentions. And the intention is to bring someone into custody or to maintain order and safety and peace. Now, in a situation like this, where we don't know the intentions of the mother, we don't have the full context of the story. We don't know if the mother panicked. We don't know if she was scared. We don't know if her intentions were to impede intentionally ICE. We don't know if she was trying to hurt them. We just can make our observations based on the video. But when you're in a situation or an encounter with law enforcement, it's best to comply and to bring the temperature down and to be in a safe situation that you make the law enforcement feel safe. And it's best for both. And let the courtroom decide. That's why in a controlled environment, we could dissect things and let the courtroom decide who's right, who's wrong, and leave things to open to interpretation. But if we leave things open to interpretation in an uncontrolled environment and chaotic and havoc within a law enforcement encounter where this vehicle is occupied by a person of interest unknown to us at this time of how to conduct business. So my message to the world, especially if you're an occupant, an operator of a vehicle, if you're in an encounter with law enforcement, whether you're right or wrong, it doesn't matter if you committed the most violent crime or if you didn't do anything. If you're in an encounter with the police, compliance equals safety. And that is what's important. This is not the courtroom. The courtroom is where
Did we lose yet? Did we lose Eric?
Yeah.
All right. We lost him. Okay. I thought that was me for a second. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. Same here. Same here.
Yeah, he's frozen. All right. Well, look, there's a few things to talk about here, right? Like, one, I'm not going to always say that cops are perfect, and I'm not going to always say that cops do the right thing, you know? So is he back or is he not back? I can't tell.
He's back.
Yeah, that hasn't happened in a long time. You know what? I've had some crazy weather. I'm out in the desert, and the wind has been insane. So sorry for that. But yeah, my point to this, though, is that compliance equals safety. This is the last place that you should actually determine right and wrong is in the street. Leave it to the courtroom.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I think everything's being missed here. And I don't believe that this situation even happens if not for the political rhetoric from the left. Fight, resist. And that comes when they're talking about ICE. It comes when they're talking about law enforcement. It comes when they're talking about people with conservative values. And I think what happens is you embolden people to go out here and actually fight and resist law enforcement while they're conducting operations. And just so we're aware, the minute you do that, you are in complete violation. You are subject to arrest immediately. You have committed a crime. You should never interfere with police officers or any type of law enforcement while they are doing their duty. I mean, how dumb is that to go after and antagonize and literally commit a crime against men with arrest authority who are armed? I mean, you're already putting yourself in a really bad situation. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't vocalize your opinion. That doesn't mean that you can't stand 10, 20 feet away, film a police officer if you think something's wrong, file a complaint, go to your local politician. That doesn't mean if you see something as a third party, there's nothing you could do about it. You could file complaints. You could go out on social media and advocate. There's many things you could do. You could utilize your First Amendment speech. But here, this is not First Amendment. This is a crime. This is obstructing governmental authority. This is stepping in front of police and trying to stop them from doing their job, which you know nothing about. You don't know right now if they're going to get Jose that works down the block in the pizzeria, or if they're going to go at Jose that works down the block and has raped 5 little girls. You have no idea what you're interjecting into, so stay out of that. Don't endanger your life. Don't endanger their life. Now, if you're the subject of being under arrest, if you're the subject of scrutiny by law enforcement and they stop you, there are so many ways to continue to fight that if you believe that you're innocent. But right at that moment in time, when you have armed men and women in a heightened state of anxiety, in a heightened state of hypervigilance, it's not the time to fight with people. I mean, you know, most of us grew up in the 80s and 90s. You remember the gangsters. You remember the Italian mafia. I've never seen one of those guys fight with the police. I've seen them get arrested for the most ridiculous crimes, the most ridiculous things that, and a lot of stuff that I read, I don't even believe is a crime. And I always watch them be complete gentlemen with the police. They turned around, they put their hands behind their back. They're like, all right, yeah, I'll be back, babe. I'll be right back. You know, and that's kind of what the messaging is here. Whether you believe that you're right or you actually committed a crime, follow the advice of Biggie Smalls. Don't resist, or you might miss Christmas, because that's what you're doing. Is not only were you committing a crime or you're being accused of committing a crime and you are going to be arrested for it, you're resisting is not only endangering your life, it's endangering the life of everybody that you're with, as well as it's going to be an additional charge on you if you survive that encounter, but you're escalating that situation. We talk a lot about de-escalating situations, turning the temperature down, but that doesn't just fall on police and law enforcement. That falls on all of us. That falls on our politicians. That falls on us as public. That falls on us as the subject of a possible arrest. You want to de-escalate that situation. I don't want an overzealous man or woman with a firearm misconstruing anything I'm doing. When I'm stopped, I keep my hands on the steering wheel. I let them know that I am nervous. I let them see my palms. I let them know I don't want you to shoot me. Whatever you need me to do, I'm going to comply. So I know a lot of people were like, oh, you're the do not comply guy. Totally different when you're facing down the barrel of a gun. Totally different. That is the time you comply. What I did was a civil litigation, and I did it civilly. I didn't fight with the police or law enforcement. I simply said, they said, do this or we're going to terminate you. I said, no, I'm not going to take the termination. I'll just retire instead. And the same for Marlon. We resisted. We didn't comply, but we weren't accused of a crime. We weren't facing an arrest. And if that time they would have came to arrest me for my refusal to comply with the vaccine mandate, I would have put my hands behind my back and I would have had my day in court.
Yeah. I'm glad John brought up the discussion we had on Monday involving the social media influencers that rage bait cops, because like we said then, we support your right to videotape police, but we don't support, but you don't have a right to get up in police face and and antagonize them and just agitate the situation. And the same thing here. We support people's right to protest. You have a fundamental right to do that in this country, but that doesn't involve you. I mean, there's a clear line that once you cross it, you're no longer. I mean, you've gone from exercising that right to obstructing government administration and antagonizing police, and one of those is driving your vehicle, accelerating your vehicle with a law enforcement officer in front of you. I mean, just think of it. I say this many times. I'm from a very liberal family, and I used to get called all the time, like, hey, I got stopped by cops and blah 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 blah. And I would always tell them the same thing. Family members, the same thing. When you're stopped by police, you follow instructions, okay? Because you never know what kind of officer has stopped you, whether you think you're right or not. You don't know how well they're trained. You don't know if he's a rookie who just got out of the academy and he's unfamiliar with the neighborhood and intimidated by it, okay? You don't know. And your actions, when you escalate the situation by not following instructions, your behavior could be interpreted as being aggressive. Okay, and remember, that officer, again, we don't know how well he's trained, and he has a firearm. Okay, so there's a lesson here. You need to do as the police say, and do not escalate the situation, because when you're escalating the situation, your behavior is going to you're putting the officer in the mind frame of survival, and it's I would rather live another day to argue in court than to get in a situation that may end right or wrong in the loss of your life. And here we have another situation that again where the motorist put the officer in that position. Okay.
Well, I think there's two flashpoints here. Sorry if I froze up before. I've had some pretty extreme weather. I'm out in the desert. And anyway, so the two flashpoints I think are this. So for one, it shows, and I've said this on prior podcasts, and I really believe this, that while we have agitators and we have anti-police throughout this country, I think that even that large group actually trust the police far more than they expect, far more they project. And the reason why I say that is because if they didn't, they wouldn't push the envelope as far as they do in encounters with armed men and women, because that's exactly what law enforcement is, armed men and women. So it shows that even those that put out this anti-police rhetoric trust the police far more than they actually project. Now, the second flashpoint, I think, is this. And in my opinion, the training for federal law enforcement, which is ICE, is far different than your local law enforcement municipalities, right? You see a cop throughout this country or a local deputy, the training is far different. And also, not only is the training different, the everyday actually performance of police work is different mission. So in my opinion, and it's that federal law enforcement engages in more intelligence, surveillance type police work, and also more tactics around planned events, right? Things that are planned, the tactical situations. And I believe that your everyday police officer throughout this entire country is dealing with the unexpected, unplanned events. So the training is far different, which to me indicates also that the threshold for havoc and chaotic situations is definitely more voluminous. And I believe there's more of a tolerance for it with your local law enforcement that is dealing on a constant basis, right? Doing neighborhood patrol, a different mission, used to the unexpected, where ICE is dealing with these planned events. So this particular person of interest, which, Ms. Good, unfortunately, tragically lost her life, but she also put herself in that situation. Most likely, it appears, based on what we see without context, that she is an agitator herself. But if that's not the case, either than that, this has nothing to do with intelligence, righteous, or having anti-police rhetoric. When you're in a situation with armed men and women, you need to comply and allow the courtroom to decide, because there's no right and wrong here. It's tragic either way, but there's no right and wrong when a law enforcement officer has to deploy their firearm. Everyone's threshold for danger is far different, and that doesn't actually equate to training. Your training is an apparatus that you apply behind your perspective, and that's why we have to support case law, which is Graham versus Connor, because someone acts in real time. And what does that mean? It means that based on your training and also your perception of danger, how you conduct. So in this video, and this particular incident, it is tragic, but the police officer, based on my assumption without context, perceived an imminent threat of death, and that's why the firearm was deployed. So training, to me, is supplemental to the perspective of the police officer or law enforcement agent in that position. Because John or myself or Marlon, we might be in that situation, but because we deal with unexpected, unplanned events on a constant basis, when we were active with the NYPD, our threshold might be far different because we were pressure tested quite often. And that's why I believe New York City police officers and also large cities like LAPD and Chicago use far more restraint than small towns, because you're used to this constant level of high stress and you're able to deal with that. So your training is supplemental to that. Now, if you're in a position like ICE, to me, their planning, their tactics is based on planned events. And I've done my research on it. Most of their cases are surveillance, intelligence, so it's a planned event. So their training is going to be supplemental to not being as pressure tested with unplanned and chaotic events. John, what are your thoughts?
I got a lot of friends that are in ICE, so I'm just gonna put that out there. That probably my next statement's gonna piss them off a little bit, but it is what it is. It's just how I feel about it. I don't believe that ICE or a military should be engaging in civil law enforcement activities. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be doing their job and going to go after violent criminals to deport them. Absolutely, they should. But what's occurring here on the street is they're basically being thrown in the middle of a protest that they have no training on how to handle and never dealt with it before. They're being put in situations they've never dealt with. Now, everyone that knows federal law enforcement, they train much more than big city law enforcement, right? They're better when it comes to the utilization of their firearms, when it comes to physical training, when it comes to tactical training. Their tactics are a lot better than civilian law enforcement agencies, right? So they train a lot more often. They have a lot more time to do so. However, in these chaotic moments of public unrest, the police, through actually doing this type of work, have a lot more nuance and a lot more training when handling these situations. So all of these sanctuary cities and states, they really are responsible for this woman's death, because we should understand that ICE is not going to, or any federal law enforcement agency for that matter, their threshold is much different and much less than a civilian police officer, not a civilian police officer, but a law enforcement, big city law enforcement officer. And they don't know how to handle these situations, and they've never had to handle them before. So when ICE is moving through these cities, I believe it's the responsibility of the local law enforcement to ensure their free access to wherever they're going back and forth through. They shouldn't have to also ensure their ability to move freely through those streets, especially in the middle of protests. We're setting ICE up for failure. We're setting civilians up for failure. We're setting these protesters and these agitators up for failure. We're literally putting everyone in a pot and turning the heat up and letting the water boil. And we're continuing to do it. And we're removing law enforcement from that equation. I personally believe law enforcement needed to be there. Now, watching the tactics on this video, I got to say, I'm gonna let me reference it right off the bat. I do believe the shooting is justified, and I'll get to the reasons why. We'll go through all of that, but at the same point, I think the tactics that are deployed here are horrible. It's an icy street. The woman's blocking traffic. She's disobeying your orders. You don't know which way the car is going to go, but good point of reference. If you're a law enforcement officer, do not ever put yourself in front of a vehicle or behind a vehicle. Ever. Not ever. If you any place you want to be, you see where this male is on the side, and even him right here, and he's not the officer that shoots, even him right here holding on to that door frame and holding on to that door handle, very scary what he's doing. Not good tactics. If now say she was a bigger, stronger man and she grabbed his arm, he's going for a ride. He's going for a ride. He might lose his life. So what I witnessed here is bad tactics, but bad tactics doesn't mean bad shoot. Bad tactics just means you could put yourself in a situation unintentionally where your only next course of action is to deploy your firearm. And I believe that's what happened here. Now, again, I believe when we go through the DOJ's policy, which is not, someone said is much different than the NYPD's. I'm going to say it's really not. It's not that much different than the NYPD's. You're going to see that he's justified because at the bottom line, when we go through Graham versus Connor, when you look at that, it's not what we perceived. It's what the officer perceives, right? It's a very dangerous job. So the United States Supreme Court gives officers a lot of leeway in that decision, and law enforcement officers have more power right there in that moment than the president of the United States does. Law enforcement officer could take your life and be justified in doing so. And I think if we had responsible politicians on both sides, they would be attempting to turn the temperature down. And I don't believe either side is doing that. And that bothers me the most. But I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, this guy did nothing wrong. Everything he did was perfect. All his tactics were great. There was no way for him to avoid this. I don't think in the moment he put himself in a bad spot. So in that split second decision, he no longer could have avoided it. But I think the things that happened prior, particularly standing in front of that vehicle or standing behind that vehicle, will put you in that situation where now you have no choice. And yes, at the end of the day, I do think this is a justified shooting. But I'd also believe it was avoidable shooting.
Yeah. I saw a comment there, just trolling 3743. He mentioned it a couple times and wanted us to respond to it. And he says, office about the officer getting back in his vehicle and leaving and not one officer intervened protocol. Well, just to answer that quickly, just trolling, I don't think we have the complete video of the scene yet. At least I haven't seen a complete video of it to show what happened in the moments after. But if the officer did leave and no one intervened, I'm just going to say that I think a lot of people are looking at this in terms of how they look at the protocol of their local PD. And you have to realize that the feds don't exactly operate like your local police department. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of videos where the officer gets involved in maybe an officer involved shooting with a perp, and they then start to do first aid on that perp. And that's something that's fairly new, because in the old days, you're waiting, EMS is doing that work. And it's only now that, a lot of officers are trained in first aid and how to triage wounds. So, so we don't fully know what their protocol is, and I think it's going to take a little while before we find that out, because in a lot of ways that's gonna, you really have to look at their internal procedures, and we don't really have access to that right just yet. But to go on what John said, I just want to point out something that we talked about this a couple months ago about what ICE is doing, right? And we pointed out how like ineffective it is as a long-term strategy. The problem is you need a whole of government approach to really get all these illegals out of this country. That means sanctuary cities, they can't exist, okay? Because you need your local governments to hold illegals when they commit crimes, and then ICE to come in and process them. Because as it stands right now, ICE, you're seeing some of the estimates of illegals in this country. It's between 12 million and 14 million. So let's take a conservative look at it and say it's 12 million, right? ICE this year, 2025, apprehended 328,000 illegals. So at that rate, it'll still take ICE like close to 37 years of this aggressive, constant, tactics to get all these illegals. Okay, it's gonna take them 37 years. So my point here is that if ICE and Homeland Security are gonna be the only ones getting these illegals, it's ineffective, and that goes back to why you need a whole of government approach, and the tactics are I believe the only real thing they're doing is agitating the situation and agitating leftists, and I personally think it's furthering that left-right divide, and at the worst moments too, because again, the more we're fighting amongst each other is the less we're noticing the changes going on in our country and in the world. And when you're putting these agents in situations that they not necessarily trained for, because they're not necessarily trained to deal with crowd control and to deal with protesters, not as well trained as your local police department who sees this repeatedly, like we see it in New York City. We've been seeing it like every 2 weeks, seemingly for the last like maybe close to 10 years now. So ICE is not trained for that. Okay. And when you're putting them in situations that they're not tactically trained for it, you're risking the chance that more situations go sideways, like you're seeing here.
Well, two things can be true at the same time, right? So this is tragic. Any loss of life is tragic. It's sad. Even if the person is the most violent perpetrator, the loss of life is still sad. It's tragic. But two things can be true at the same time. Now, I'm going to second that. And since the onset of this incident, I have determined, based on my observations, based on what I watched, injecting my own police experience, I do believe the shooting is justified. Now, because a shooting is justified doesn't mean that it's far from imperfect, right? Policing itself, policing happens in a compressed time, and it's based with imperfect information with deadly consequences for the police officer and the person of interest involved in an encounter. That's why we say put your intelligence aside, put your emotions aside. Even if you have the right to something, you have to put that aside. These encounters have deadly consequences. Tactics are so important, but the public has to understand that we put too much emphasis on the responsibility and accountability of the police officer, but there should be accountability for yourself to protect yourself. If you're in a situation, right or wrong, you have to comply because there are deadly consequences, whether they're right or wrong. Now, I do believe that this is a failure on all sides. Absolutely. That's why I said we talk about the left I think the left has been seeking for the next George Floyd constantly. I think they're always in this search for the next George Floyd, but for the right also. So this sanctuary cities are a complete failure because our local law enforcement should be the front line law enforcement in any apparatus when it comes to local streets in America. Now, ICE should be there to assist if they're making street apprehensions, not there as the primary. Their primary training is for planned events, as I said. And I kind of correlate this to, do they have training? Sure. But they're not often pressure tested. That is what is part of training. Local law enforcement, small cities, towns, especially large cities throughout this country, are constantly pressure tested, constantly in the street, patrolling in environments where the unexpected could happen at any moment. So just that feeling, if you're a police officer and you're dealing with that everyday stress, is training. You're getting more training just being out there and being pressure tested. And I kind of equate this to training when it comes to martial arts, like combat sports or self-defense programs. You see a lot of people get involved in self-defense programs, right? And they learn how to punch or how to kick, how to grab someone that's kind of static, right? But they're in a self-defense program, there's not necessarily mutual combat. So they're not being pressure tested. So they're learning how to punch, they're learning how to kick, but they're not actually punching and kicking with another human being. So I think it kind of equates the same thing with ICE. They're getting all this training, but they're not pressure tested, where a police officer like combat sports is constantly sparring, constantly being pressure tested. Police, local law enforcement is sparring every day. They're out there engaging with people. If it's just, hey, are you lost? Having conversations with people. So constantly used to the unknown, where ICE is not trained for that environment. They're trained for a planned environment. And so they're also not getting that everyday chaotic, unknown environment. So that's why there's a huge comparison. So it's a failure on all sides. ICE should be assisting local law enforcement who is constantly pressure tested in that specific environment, right? Because policing is not a one size fits all. That's the other thing about federal law enforcement. Federal law enforcement has training. It's federalized, right? So the training for someone that is an ICE agent who operates in New York City, they get the same training for someone who's operating in some small town in Texas. But yet, those are different environments. And policing is not a one size fits all. The way you carry yourself and your presence and training should be different in New York City than it is in some small town in Texas. So a small town police officer in Texas is going to understand that environment. If we take a New York City police officer and put someone in a small town in Texas, they're going to be confused, disoriented. It's a different environment, and vice versa. We take that person from Texas, put them in New York. But with ICE, a federalized agency, they're getting the same training and they're operating in different environments throughout this entire country. And again, I say policing is not a one size fits all.
So here's the problem, right? And here's the problem with Sanctuary City. Like Marlon had touched on it. He talks about the whole of government approach to solve this issue. The way that ICE is operating right now, they're only getting 350,000 people a year. If we keep up at that rate, it'll take 36 years, like Marlon said, to get all of the illegals out. So what's happening is the left is actually forcing ICE to operate like this. Right? They're forcing them to go out and move like this because they have been pushed out of the whole of government approach. The whole of government approach would be when your local law enforcement interacts with someone that ICE has a retainer on, you hold them, you called ICE, ICE comes and picks them up, right? How much more effective would that be? And how much less friction would there be out in the street? There would be so much less friction, right? Because we're dealing with all of this in the courts. If we allowed ICE to take people out of Rikers Island, out of our jails, out of the court system that they have retainers on, they wouldn't have to be out on our streets. So while the left is saying ICE shouldn't be doing this, they're actually forcing them out on the streets to operate in such a manner this way, which will cause more incidents, right? The more times we're going to deal in incidents like this, it's the more time that tragedy is going to occur. Whether it be an ICE agent get killed or a civilian get killed, because we're putting all of us into a pot and turning the temperature up. This should not be the approach to handling illegal immigration. It should be an all of government approach. ICE shouldn't be left out as the redheaded stepchildren from doing and being kept out. Like, you're evil for doing your job. You're evil for enforcing federal immigration law that every other nation on this earth enforces. But only in America is it racist. Only in America is it fascist. Only in America is it wrong. And the people that are saying that in their gated communities from behind their locked doors. And this is what's happened. So let's go to the video here. People are saying, if it wasn't for the ICE, she would have hit him with the vehicle. But watching this video, you clearly see her hit him with the vehicle. If it wasn't for the ICE, he probably would have got ran over or would have had to jump out of the way. Thankfully, the ICE pushes him. So if you watch this, here you go. This again, I think the tactics are horrible. I don't think you should ever stand in front of a vehicle ever. Right? So watch what happens. They tell her to stop. They tell her to get out of the car. Instead, she reverses and then she goes forward. Watch what happens. So she's reversing here to get away. The guy's telling her, stop, stop, stop. He's got his hand in the car. He could get his hand caught. Very bad move. Guy's in the front. He pulls his gun. Boom. You see him. He got hit with the car. He got hit with the car and he shot. Right? You'll see it again from a different angle. Boom. You see him get hit with the car. Boom. He shoots. He hits her in the head. She is dead. Now, people will say he could have moved out of the way. He didn't have to shoot. Look, he's standing in front of the vehicle. I don't know how many other options you have at that point when your firearm's out and the car is moving towards you. I don't know what else it is. If someone's going to sit there and say you're in front of that vehicle and you're ordering someone to stop and they move their vehicle towards you, you see a 5,000-pound machine coming at you, person who was already not compliant. If you're going to tell me you cannot reasonably fear for your life or fear of serious injury, you're not talking as a reasonable person, because it's very easily he could have been under that vehicle. Now, again, I'm going to say it again. I believe the tactics were horrendous here, but that does not mean it was a bad shoot.
Yeah, absolutely. Stake Trained Up mentioned that how frustrating it is to see that the local governments aren't involved in the process, and they kind of, they kind of left, like John says, ICE is kind of left to do this on its own. And to that, I'm gonna say that it's not only that, but at the same time, these governments have been kind of, making the situation worse by making inflammatory comments to its ICE, and kind of encouraging its residents to basically have an open rebellion against the federal government. And while we disagree with ICE's overall strategy, I think they should be. Now, don't get me wrong. I think they should always be going after the most dangerous illegals that are hit. But again, these tactics, that the empanada lady should not be facing a squad of ICE agents dressed up in tactical gear together. It to me it's really silly. And again, when you're going into communities that are, places like Portland, places like Chicago, places that are that you already know are very left leaning, and in the case of a place like Portland, even the wackos over there have literally like almost stormed federal court buildings. So when you go into those communities with tactical gear, and you give the impression that you're an invading army, it's just a cocktail that's it's a dangerous cocktail. And but these mayors who the point that we've been saying for a while is that a lot of these mayors in these localities, they they don't want, they're kind of using what ICE is doing to divert the attention from their own problems. And I think in the case of Minneapolis, Mayor Frey, who's a really wacky guy, from his comments, he literally said, get the F out, for ICE a couple of days ago. His comments are really wacky, but when you look at what's going on in his city, he's facing a lot of problems, and not just budget, but like he's losing residents and he's losing businesses and things are, he's even losing cops. So things are going downhill. And here he is inflaming the situation to further distract people from their own problems. And in doing so, he's riling up these people, and in a lot of ways displacing their anger towards their own individual lives on ICE. And again, that's a dangerous cocktail.
No, I'm gonna be honest. So it's a loss of life. It's tragic. It really is terrible. However, with that being said, it's stupid. It's just plain stupid. It's stupid to be surrounded by men and women with guns and to put yourself in this precarious position, right? Stupidity does have consequences, and sometimes deadly consequences when you're in a potential deadly situation with law enforcement. And that's exactly what this is. That's why I said these are not perfect situations. They happen in compressed time. And we expect law enforcement, men and women with guns, to make the most precarious decisions in the most chaotic environments. Now, nobody trains for something like this, right? How are we going to operate with when the entire street is covered with ice? And that's why I talk about these uncontrolled environments, right? When you're doing law enforcement, often when you're doing your work, often what is considered in the dangers of your situation, time of day, right? The density of or populated or unpopulated area that you're working in, the environment, and weather. Weather is also a factor when it comes to tactics, planning, and training. These icy situations make it far more dangerous for the person of interest who lost their life tragically, and far more dangerous for the police officers. Now, again, I'll say that on that particular ICE agent that grabbed at the car and created connectivity at that point, that's just plain stupid. That's stupid. You can still have time and distance and still see your adversary, still make sure you're all positioned with it, you're not flanking each other, and still be able to address the occupant. Now, unfortunately, what people don't understand is that what I hear often from this idea of de-escalation is, let the person go, we can get them another day. And law enforcement doesn't always have that decision, right? Unfortunately, in some cases, yes, law enforcement can let people go and say, we'll get them another day. But right now, this person is driving erratically. They could, I don't know what time of day it is right now, but they could hit a child that's out there playing. The person that lost their life, which is completely sad, but at this moment, she is a threat not only to the police officers there, but she's a threat to everyone else. So they don't have a choice to let her go. They have to take action. So while the shooting is tragic, it's still justified. It's justified even with terrible tactics. Could better tactics have avoided the shooting? I do believe so. However, we put ICE in a situation that does not have the pressure-tested training and volume that a local law enforcement officer in a big city has. So this is just complete setup for failure. I feel sorry that this woman lost her life, even if she is, some people are saying, she deserved. No one deserves to be shot. This person needs to be educated that if you want to be an agitator, or if you just don't want to comply with the police because you think you're righteous, you put yourself in a situation where you can lose your life. It's a deadly encounter. Every law enforcement encounter has deadly consequences. We have men and women there with firearms who act on real time. They're not sitting from some couch. Just, if this happened in New York, we would have some civilian complaint review board investigator sitting there with their fat belly from a couch making a decision on what should be done and what shouldn't. We can't do that. This is happening real time. The police officers are in a chaotic environment with a lack of training that local law enforcement has. This is a recipe for disaster. So it's a failure on leadership. Everything we talk about when the NYPD, when we talk about leadership, failure on leadership. When we talk about failures that happen, it's leadership. when we talk about things that happen nationwide, when it's failures, this failure is the leadership of this country. Politicians that have put law enforcement and community at odds. And I agree with you, Marlon. Absolutely. We're sending, right, rhetorically speaking, we're sending our killers, right? We're sending heavy artillery, heavily armed men and women in situations with grandmas and the like Marlon said, the empanada mama, right? With men that are heavily armed, and people like this may not understand the veracity of the situation. You're in a battle now. When you're on the street with armed men and women, you're in battle. And this is not the time to try to evade the police, whether you're scared or you want to actually hurt the police officer. The bottom line is, and John's right, if you look at that, she struck that police officer. So he's in an icy environment, not dealing with unplanned and chaotic environments on a constant basis. The officer was struck. That's a scary point. That's a scary position to be in. What do you want that cop to do at that point? Just run away? And law enforcement doesn't have that option. If our law enforcement throughout this entire country, local municipalities and our federal law enforcement just ran away from situations, who would actually apprehend criminals? Who would actually maintain order? So they don't always have the choice to run away or make that decision to leave. The law enforcement has to stop what's going on and see the bigger picture. The bigger picture is this woman is not only a threat to the law enforcement right there and then, but to everyone else because she's chaotic and erratic. And it's interesting how it's a catch-22 being in law enforcement. Because if they did let her go and she drove like a maniac and, God forbid, mowed down a kid down the street, everyone would be saying, why didn't they stop her? So the police do not have a position and do not always have the ability to let someone go. Sometimes they have to stop them, and that means at all means.
So the New York Post is reporting that this woman was part of the ICE watch. She was trained to interfere with ICE, right? And this has been happening throughout the country. We've seen this in Chicago. We've seen this in LA. We've seen this in New York City. We've now seen this in Minneapolis, all with similar results. And nothing's being done to address this. So I don't blame the federal government. I don't blame the state government. I blame every single elected official in this country. I blame every head of every law enforcement agency in this country that this has been allowed to fester in the manner that it has. Public safety should be apolitical. Politics has no place on the streets of America when we're talking about the actions of law enforcement agencies. This whole scenario right here, why do we have people that they have a mission and an organization to stop a law enforcement agency from operating in this country? Do you know what that is called, people? It's called domestic terrorism. Where is Kash Patel? Where was the tough guy Dan Bongino for the last year to investigate these groups and go after them and charge them? Right? You want to talk about charging a bunch of Italian guys in a deli that was sipping espresso for conspiracy. Where's the conspiracy here when we're seeing the actions play out in place? Where's the FBI to go after these? Where's our local law enforcement? Because the other thing, like I've been saying forever, since we started this, since we've been talking about this, since we've been watching the takeover of New York City since October 7th, 2023, who is going after the people that are funding these protests, that are funding these illegal actions on our streets, where they're taking over streets, they're taking over critical infrastructure, they're making businesses shut down, they're giving people the inability to walk freely on our sidewalks, to move freely in our streets. And now they're so emboldened that they're even attempting to stop law enforcement agencies from doing their job and going after the law. So I blame everybody. I blame Donald Trump. I blame Keith Ellison. I blame Letitia James. I blame Eric Adams. I blame John Schell. I blame every police chief. And I hate to even call them chief because, like I said, if this was Native American culture, the majority of these men would out be picking berries. They wouldn't be leading anybody, because they're not leaders at all. Because if you were a law enforcement agency in Minnesota and you knew that ICE were doing operations that day, you should be very close to those operations, not far and cowering away because you're afraid of what your progressive mayor or your progressive attorney general or your progressive state governor is going to say about it. And so what we've seen is we've seen law enforcement's divided. We've seen politicians divided. And what is their ultimate goal? All of the division. They're dividing the public. They're dividing the American public, and they're causing chaotic reactions on our streets. So let's get into the law a little bit, because I think that's the other thing. Like, we went through the video. She clearly hits him with the vehicle. He clearly tells her to stop. They clearly yell instructions. She knew she was not free to leave at that moment in time, yet continued to do it. So, and continued to drive, and not only continued to drive, drove directly at an officer with a firearm pointed at her. If you were looking to be shot that day, I mean, that's what happened. That's what happened. She was shot based upon her own actions. So this is coming directly from the Department of Justice. This is the U.S. Department of Justice website. This is 1116 Department of Justice policy on the use of force. Right. So let's just go a little bit into the background. It's the policy of the Department of Justice to value and preserve human life. Officers may only use the force that is objectively reasonable to effectively gain of an incident while protecting the safety of the officer and others. In keeping with standards set forth in Graham v. Connor, 490 U.S. 386, 1989, officers may use force only when no reasonably effective, safe, and feasible alternative to exist, and may use only the level of force that is reasonable officer on the scene would use under the same or similar circumstances. So you're pointing a firearm at a subject, you're telling them to stop, they're not free to leave, and the subject and their vehicle, which is 5,000 pounds, slams on the gas and starts approaching to you. I mean, it spells it out clear as day just in the background. What do you guys think just on the background as it relates to the video?
Yeah. As we said, I think now the shooting may not look pretty, okay, but as you know, as we've said many times before, a lot of times law enforcement isn't pretty, okay, but as it's spelled out right here, it's justified, okay. And I think I think a lot of people on the left are going to, again, they're trying to, tensions are being, there are opportunists, right, that are trying to rile up the situation and turn this, like Eric says, into the next George Floyd, okay. But clearly it's right there in the Fed's own rules, okay. It's right there, okay. And again, as we said, if you put yourself in a situation where the officers interprets your behavior as aggression, okay, as aggressive, and that you're trying to take his life, you're essentially, you're inherently faffling, okay. And when you put yourself in that situation, the incidents tend to escalate and go sideways, and it's just not smart, okay. And to go back on what John said also, we've been talking about this for a while, okay, and we've been saying, like, what exactly is happening with our government, and why before incidents go sideways like this, you get to the root of it, and you cut the head off the snake, you know, and these are actions that should have been taken years ago to find out who's funding a lot of these wackos to go and that feel that this is, that they have a right to obstruct government, okay. Who's funding them? And in this case, that organization, Ice Watch, okay, is they have a lot of funding from the government themselves, okay. We talk about, like, the whole of government approach, and that should have come about by Trump once he got into office, okay, forcing these localities to get right and to get on the program. Okay. And like John said it himself also, that a lot of these law enforcement executives, you should have been running investigations on these organizations too. Okay. And if you can't do anything about it, you should have made it publicly known who is funding these organizations. And if it's government themselves, you should have gone after them. Okay. If the money itself is coming from city council and from the local governments, you should have get on top of that. But none of it is happening. And in this case, one of the two groups mentioned here, MIRAC, which is it is the Minnesota Immigrant Rights Action Committee. Okay. Again, they are receiving government funds. In fact, they have also received federal grants. Okay. So you're seeing these paid protesters being paid by your own tax dollars. Okay. And additionally, there are some other organizations involved in here who are connected to large corporations and large foundations that the government should have gone after, but they're not. Okay. And by the fact that they're not going after them, the situation is constantly being escalated, and you have a greater likelihood that things are going to go sideways. Incidents are going to go sideways like this.
So normally I don't address the trolls. I rather thank them for being fans and actually watching this platform. But we have this idiot on here right now, 9 Inch Nails, who's one of our newest trolls, and we know who it is. But I just want to address this issue just to show that people speak from a place of stupidity. So 9 Inch Nails here is saying that John is soft because you would be scared of this woman. Now, that's absolutely silly. This woman is an occupant before she lost her life, which is still tragic, no matter what. Before she lost her life, she was the occupant of a vehicle. Now, the average car weighs anywhere from 4,000 to 6,000 pounds. And for SUVs and trucks, that weight increases drastically. We're talking about how you could utilize your car as a weapon, and it could be deadly, right? Your car is great for logistics, but it could also be used as a weapon. It reminds me of this story. I remember one time in the Bronx DA's office. Remember my team and I, we made an arrest. We got someone with a legal firearm, and it was a chaotic situation. And I never forget this female DA. She was laughing at us. She was laughing at us because it turned out it was a little Derringer that we caught. If anyone knows anything about guns, a little Derringer, in this case, you could fire 2 shots, small caliber rounds. It's so small that you could put this little firearm, probably fit the butt of the gun in your coin pocket. But it's still deadly. It's a legal firearm in the hands of a violent perpetrator. And she was laughing at us. Oh, you guys are scared of this little gun? And that just shows that people speak, again, as I say, the Dunning-Kruger effect. They speak about things they don't know about. So clearly 9 Inch Nails doesn't know anything about police work. I don't know if you were a police officer. I heard you were, but you surely weren't a cop. 9 Inch Nails, if you ever worked in law enforcement, because you would understand that a woman, even a child, in a 4,000 to 6,000 pound vehicle could be an extremely deadly situation for a man or a woman in law enforcement carrying a firearm. Same thing for a little Derringer. A little Derringer in the hands of a child could be, or the hands of someone with bad intentions could be deadly. So people speak from absolutely no knowledge, a place of stupidity, and I believe people speak from a place of hate. And that's what I think makes this platform unique. We don't speak from a place of hate. Rather, we speak from a place about finding the truth. We want to find the truth and find a fair assessment. I think it's fair to say that shooting had tactical mistakes, but it's justified. No one should be put in the situation that their lives are on the line and that they have to, the accountability has to be on law enforcement to get themselves home safe because someone else wants to put them in a dangerous or deadly situation. We put way too much onus and way too much responsibility on law enforcement for the acts of stupidity. So while law enforcement is supposed to be professional and do everything in their power to mitigate and to keep everyone safe, we also have to understand the position that law enforcement is also. And these are humans. These are men and women that have to act in real time and in scary situations. So, I mean, again, 9 Inch Nails, obviously you weren't a cop, and neither are you a common sense and logical person. But again, thank you for watching. Thank you for being a fan. I appreciate it. And I also want to piggyback. Our brother Pete Faselli here, Finest Unfiltered family, says this should be RICO cases. So while I agree with John also, these cases should be looked into, and they should be RICO cases, not treated as just people on the street committing crimes, but there's something behind the scenes. There are people paying for this. These people are funded. They're organized. These are domestic terrorist groups, in my opinion. Absolutely, Pete. Spot on, brother. Thank you.
So Real Raboul, I think that's how you say it, 2962. At one time, it was illegal for black people to sit in front of a bus. You could be arrested for that. So it took people to not comply and fight. So now that black people can have those rights now. So I'm pretty familiar with the civil rights movement. And it was peacefully protest. They peacefully resisted. Rosa Parks didn't sit in the front of the bus. And then when the cop came, she spit in his face and punched him in the face. Right? No. What Rosa Parks did was she said, I'm going to sit in the front of the bus. Lock me up. Let's take this to court. Let's fight this out in the United States Supreme Court. And when the cops came and arrested her, she put her hands behind her back and she went to jail peacefully. I live now close to St. Augustine. There's a restaurant in St. Augustine where Martin Luther King attended, because at one time in the 60s, black people could not eat in the restaurant. So what Martin Luther King did is he came down to St. Augustine and he said, okay. And he walked in the restaurant. He sat down. He's like, I demand to be served. He believed the law was immoral. He believed that the law was not consistent with the United States Constitution, where it said that, in fact, all men are created equal. He believed that St. Augustine, as well as many other districts and cities and states throughout this country, were violating the United States Constitution. He didn't show up with a gun. He didn't show up with an angry mob and destroy the business. He walked in a suit and tie, and he sat down at a restaurant, and he was arrested. And when the cops came, he put his hands behind his back. He went to jail, and he fought it out in court. And today, I was just in St. Augustine with a few of my friends who are people of color, and we could sit in restaurants and eat as a result of peacefully protesting. They didn't go out. They didn't interfere in law enforcement operations. That was what is known as civil disobedience. It's civilly being arrested. Times of the vaccine mandate, my children, my wife, myself, we couldn't eat in restaurants in New York City because we were considered less than, we were considered the dirty disease spreaders. So a few patriots went out to those restaurants, and what they did is they didn't destroy those restaurants. They didn't beat up the cops. They didn't do anything. They sat down and they demanded to be served, and they peacefully protested. And in an act of civil disobedience, they refused to comply. The police officers came in there, gave them several warnings. They refused to leave. And when the police officers finally made the decision to make an arrest, those patriots put their hand behind their back. They got arrested. They had their day in court. The case was thrown out. The mandates were lifted. And here we are as Americans. What's happening here on the streets of all of our major cities is we have people who are inciting a civil war. They're pitting law enforcement agencies against each other. They're pitting us, useful idiots, against each other. We have to be smarter. This country was founded on the right of the individual, on the right of your freedom to speak, on your right of civil disobedience. But that does not give you the right to go out there and break the law and then violently resist. And that's what happened here. So let's go further into the use of deadly force. So deadly physical force, again, this is coming out from the Department of Justice. All right, let's go deadly force. A, law enforcement and correctional officers of the Department of Justice may use deadly force only when necessary. That is, when the officer has a reasonable belief that the subject of such force poses an imminent danger of death or serious physical injury to the officer or to another. So let's put that in layman's terms. You're behind the wheel of a 5,000-pound vehicle. There are numerous officers surrounding you, telling you not to move, and you decide to slam on the gas. Did you put that officer Did you give him a reasonable belief that the use of deadly physical force, the force that you're using with that vehicle, poses an imminent danger of death or serious physical injury to him and another? I mean, I think we could all reasonably agree here, people, that it does. One, deadly force may not be used solely to prevent the escape of a fleeing suspect, meaning if the officers were behind the vehicle, actually, let me say that, to the side of the vehicle, because again, tactically, if you're in front of a vehicle or you're behind a vehicle at any point, you're a moron. I'm sorry. Your tactics are horrible. Go back to the drawing board. Go back to the drawing board. But again, bad tactics does not mean bad shoot. That's why we don't cross over in the back of vehicles when we pull them over. We stay to the sides. If you're the driver, you stay on the driver's side of the vehicle. If you're the passenger in the police vehicle, you stay on the passenger side of the vehicle. You don't cross behind the car because you don't want to get pinned between your RMP and that vehicle. You don't walk in the front of a car because you don't want to get ran over or run in front of that vehicle. You stay on the sides of that vehicle. So if the person slammed, now if you're where you should be, which is on the side of that vehicle, and that person slams on the gas and takes away, you can't shoot them. You can't use deadly physical force. You can't do what Stephen A. Smith was suggesting that the cops should have done, was shoot the tires. Absolutely not. That's why Stephen A. Smith should stick to basketball, not police work, not politics. Basketball is your thing. You want to comment on football a little bit? Fine. I don't think you're much of a football player, but whatever. You know, don't talk about things you don't know. Absolutely, you cannot shoot out someone's tires to stop a fleeing suspect. Now, here's the part that everyone's hanging on. Line 2. Firearms may not be discharged solely to disable moving vehicles. Did you hear that, Stephen? Specifically, firearms may not be discharged at a moving vehicle unless, 1, a person in the vehicle is threatening the officer or another person with deadly physical force by means other than the vehicle. That means they're pointing a firearm at you. They're throwing a Molotov cocktail window. They're throwing a Molotov cocktail out the window. They're using deadly physical force other than the vehicle, right? But let's keep reading. Let's keep reading. Let's not just highlight that and say, there it is. There it is. Let's keep reading. 2, the vehicle is operated in a manner that threatens to cause death or serious physical injury to the officer or others, and no other objectively reasonable means of defense appear to exist, which includes moving out of the path of the vehicle. Firearms may not be discharged from a moving vehicle except in exigent circumstances. In these situations, an officer must have an articulable reason for the use of deadly physical force. Let's go back to the beginning of that statement. The vehicle is operated in a manner that threatens to cause death or serious physical injury to the officer or others, and no other objectively reasonable means of defense appears to exist. Meaning that if the officer could move out of the way, then he should, right? Because if he deploys deadly physical force, just because he could articulate that, well, you know, they were operating the vehicle in a manner that made me fear for my life and it could have caused death to me or someone else, then they're not justified if they have the ability to. But do you have the ability to move out of the way on an icy road while the vehicle's already on top of you and hits you? I don't believe so.
Yeah. I saw this comment by Absolute. Absolute says, we don't know if she slammed on the gas. We do, Absolute. It's clear in that video. You know, that car didn't move on its own. And even if you want to say, okay, she didn't hit the gas, well, she certainly took her feet off the brake and the car was certainly rolling towards the officer. Okay. So again, she put herself in a precarious situation, and as John just showed you, the officer was justified in discharging rounds at it. Okay, now again, it doesn't look pretty, but like we said, the law enforcement a lot of times does not look pretty. Okay, and the officer didn't wake up this morning and say, you know what, I feel like doing. I feel like killing a protester. Okay, so let's cut the nonsense out. Okay, um, I think in a lot of ways, yeah, I don't know how to remove that off the screen. Yeah, I think
I got it.
yeah, I think in a lot of ways, too many people have the last comment John put up where the guy compared this to the civil rights movement. See, the problem is like a lot of people in America have been brainwashed for decades to build their identity around victimhood and victimhood, the civil rights, and like a struggle. Okay, a civil rights struggle. And the problem is that they've won. Okay, we've won. America is not the same place that it was like 70 years ago. Okay, I always have people saying like, again, my family is very, very liberal. Okay, and I've talked before about wanting to leave New York and go to some place, go to the free parts of America. Okay, and they tell me like, I've heard comments like, oh, there's no black people there. And I'm like, I've been to almost every part of America already, and there's still people who think that we're living in like 70 years ago, where if I go to some neighborhood, I'm gonna get lynched or something. And unfortunately, it's because a lot of people have been brainwashed for that 7 years, thinking that we're still like we were in the early 60s and the 50s, and we're not. Okay, so these people are always looking for the next civil rights cause. Okay, and this is how we get to that last comment where the guy compared this to the civil rights movement. Okay, things are a little more nuanced than the past. Okay, it's not the ICE is not George Wallace. What's that governor who said segregation? Now I think it was George Wallace. It's not the same fight. Okay, it's not the same fight, and people need to stop. If you keep thinking like that, you're gonna get used by these groups, by these organizations, and you're gonna put yourself in a precarious situation like this lady did, and it's people need to wake up now and realize things aren't like the past.
Well, can you imagine this idiot 9 Inch Nails was a lawyer? Imagine 9 Inch Nails was a lawyer. Because if 9 Inch Nails, this idiot, was a lawyer, they really don't understand that the Constitution is extremely important in a case like this, right? The most important Supreme Court case that actually shows the Constitution exists. And Constitution, right, when we protect civil liberties and also keeping people safe and enforcing the law, are not opposites. They should coexist. So the most important Supreme Court case, I believe, in this instance, is Graham versus Connor, right? Because if we remove Graham versus Connor, then what we're doing is we're just evaluating the outcome of an incident and not the reasonableness of what's going on in real time. Does anyone think it's unreasonable that what law enforcement officers on icy streets, has anyone ever walked on an icy street? I mean, most of us here are from New York or cold parts of this country. Unless you're living in Florida or deep parts of Texas or Louisiana, you experience cold and probably some icy conditions, even in the desert. So walking on icy conditions is extremely dangerous, especially when you have a firearm. And if anyone, I don't care how, if you're a great dancer or you're good with your feet, when you're walking on ice, I got this fly over here, excuse me. When you're walking on ice, it's extremely dangerous, and we all could lose our footing. I remember one time when I was a rookie, I'll never forget, I was with my partner at the time, James Valachi. He remembers we had pulled someone over, and it was a snowy day, and there was like a mound of snow. So I remember he was on the driver's side, and I had to walk up on the passenger side, and there was a mound of snow. And I figured I'm pretty athletic. I could walk on this mound of snow and still watch the car. Well, when we turned around to go back to the car to check this person's record, my feet went out in front of me. I went up in the air and went right down. And thank God, turned out to be nice people, and we all started laughing. But that's a dangerous situation. So expect the cops to actually get out of the situation where they're walking on ice while someone did make contact. The perpetrator, in this case, yes, she lost her life tragically, but she was a perpetrator. She hit the police officer. That is a deadly situation. Walking on ice, he's supposed to get out of the way. If anyone thinks that you can walk on ice and get out of the way, go put on a pair of ice skates right now. Go to your local ice skating rink. Or don't even put on ice skates. Go to your local ice skating rink and just walk on with your shoes and tell me how far you get before you fall on your ass. So now we have a police officer who's struck by a car, and they're supposed to hold their footing and get out of the way while they're on ice. That's absolutely unrealistic. This is coming from people that have no idea and just frankly just don't care. So 9 Inch Nails, this platform is to find the truth. Do you want to find the truth, or you just want to be a troll because really you don't care? And on this platform, we actually care about people. We care about the truth and what makes sense. So if you want to remove Graham versus Connor, you can look at the outcome and say, yes, someone tragically lost their life. And how can we avoid this? But you have to look at Graham versus Connor, what was happening in real time. And Graham versus Connor is a very simple case, right? It's where a judge decides that, hey, did a police officer act reasonably in real time based on the circumstances, not with your fat belly hanging out, sitting on a couch, watching while you're having a cold beer. This is a real time. These are real incidents. So let's have an actual conversation. So opposition meets opportunity. So 9 Inch Nails, I would, if you have the opportunity, I would get some law books and maybe seek out. Maybe you would like to read the law. You know, you don't have to be a lawyer. Maybe you'd like to become a lawyer and see how things work.
Yeah, and you know, like, so everyone's like talking about, well, the local law enforcement agencies won't assist ICE. And again, I agree with you. I think it's horrendous. And it just shows how inept the Trump administration is. Because if you actually believed in what you were doing, what I would immediately do is not only would I audit all of their crime statistics that they're putting out while they're trying to debunk what's actually happening in all the cities, trying to say, oh, no, we don't need police. Look, crime's going down with less police. Crime's going down with going away from policing. What I would do is make sure that their crime statistics were real. And the other thing I would do is say, oh, well, you're not going to assist law enforcement officers, and you're also not helping your residents while there are moments of civil disobedience, public unrest, and you're allowing people to take over your streets, take over your roadways, and preventing not only law enforcement, but preventing tax-paying residents from walking and moving freely and driving freely in your own streets. No problem. You're not assisting in counterterrorism efforts. So that means that you don't need any of my federal funding. So you could be on your own, and let me know how that works out for you. If you're going to leave the federal government on its own to engage in the core mission of keeping this country safe, keeping our borders secure, because without our borders, let's get this straight, we don't have a country. Without locks on your doors and laws to protect you, you don't have a house. Without locks on your car, you don't have a car. So if you're for all that, let everybody come in. Let everybody come in your house, eat up all your food, take all your money out of your bank account, sleep with your wife, do what they will with your with whatever you earned, your vehicles, your tools, whatever. They could come take whatever they want. Hey, this is who we are, right? Like, that's it. So this is where I blame what's happening with this administration. This is all being allowed to happen. You're sitting there patting the NYPD on the back in one instance, and then in the same instance, you're like, yeah, well, you know, they're not helping ICE because of sanctuary city law. And it's like, well, I don't give a shit if Jessica Tisch hung out with your daughter. Doesn't matter to me. I don't care if they went to the same school together. I don't care if little Donnie Boy banged one of the other lefties in the NYPD. I don't really give a shit. Doesn't matter. What matters is, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? What is the goal of your administration? Is it to further your business operations in big cities like New York City? Or is it you're going to make America great again? You're going to make law enforcement great again? Because if we're going to do that, we need a whole of government approach to secure our borders, to remove violent, dangerous criminals off of our streets. And if we're just allowing all of this insanity to happen, we're beating them up on one instance, but then there are partners in another instance, We're watching WWE, people. What they're trying to do is what they got. They're getting someone gets got on the streets of Minneapolis, and now there's riots and protests throughout the entire country. And instead of calming the flames, not one side is trying to do that. They're just throwing gasoline through sound bites and all of this other garbage. And no one's talking about the nuance of what happens. No one's talking about what should have been done. And no one's trying to do anything to correct this, only to further us down this road. So that's why this platform is significantly different. Because again, I'll say it one last time. The tactics were horrendous. The shooting was still justified. But what the hell have the local and federal law enforcement agencies been doing to stop these organizations from acting as anarchists and domestic terrorists and going after our law enforcement agencies and causing chaos on our streets? They've done nothing. They all look inept. They all look incompetent. They all look like a bunch of people that didn't earn it.
Yeah. John is a spot on here. Keep in mind again that the two of those groups receive government grants. Okay, 2 million in fact for Kupel. Okay, 2 million federal grants. Okay, what are we doing? And again, what are local police doing? Because as of right now, they're setting up a Chaz autonomous zone on the street. So there you are, nine inch nails. You asked, why can't people take over the streets if ICE can? There you go. They're doing that right now. Right now, they have their own Chaz there getting built right now. Okay, imagine if you're tax paying, you pay property tax in this area. You have your nice homes, and the homes, most of the homes look pretty nice in that block, right? They look pretty large as well, And you come outside your street, and this is what you're facing. How many of these people you think actually live in your neighborhood? I'm willing to bet that 95% of them don't, and this is happening on your block. Okay, so think how much of a failure it is of the local government that this actually even happened. Because I'm gonna say, if Minneapolis police were there to begin with, they could have been conducting crowd control, and they could have potentially prevented that vehicle from even getting in that position. Okay. This is a failure of local government, and they're continuing to fail the people. And again, the more governments fail to do their job, the more these incidents will go sideways, and the more we the regular citizens and law enforcement personnel get trapped in the middle of it. Okay, where the collateral damage because of their malfeasance. Okay, and again, if the mayor were to do his actual job, this wouldn't have happened. And if he would at least turn down the volume on his inflammatory remarks, you potentially have less wackos who are going to put themselves in a position for ICE to maybe potentially use deadly physical force.
To your point earlier, John, when we talk about figures like Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, these are great figures throughout our entire history. And this country was built on healthy protest. We have healthy protest, aside from these chaotic protests that we have right now that are paid by agitators. But in New York City alone, we have healthy protest day in and day out, every day, even before this madness. When I was working in the Lower East Side, every day, even back in 2009, every day there was, whether one person or a small group, having healthy protest. And if we had to move them along, if they were impede a sidewalk or something like that, we explained to them, to find a position, where they could have their healthy protest and they could protest, but just don't impede the sidewalks, don't impede people's passengers and vehicles and people walking. And it was healthy protest. This country was built on healthy protest. Legislation has moved the needle in this country by healthy protest. But what we see now is exactly that. It's domestic terrorism. This is not healthy protest when they're funded, and people that have no interest other than a money-making scheme They're not trying to move legislation. They're just trying to create more chaos. And it's come to the point that the Dems want it and the Republicans want it also to move their agenda. And this has all come down to agenda. And that's why I always say the Dems have been seeking for their next George Floyd. And now they found it in a white woman. So clearly we could say that it's not about race. We could debunk this whole thing about George Floyd, that it's not about race. The race is about anti-blue. Why? Because the local law enforcement and ICE, and I've been saying this for the longest time, law enforcement is the most tangible form of government in this entire country, where people can actually have encounters and put their hands on it, unlike when you try to propose a bill that takes months or years to actually make a change. Not with New York City Council. When it comes to these changes, they come so quick. But when it comes to actually changing government for an agenda, your local law enforcement is the key. If we move to more artificial intelligence and move to robots and move to agendas, you need to attack your local law enforcement, which is the most tangible form of government. And that's what we see. That's why they're always seeking the next George Floyd. So George Floyd, while the premise of it, a lot of it was projected about race, we can see it's not about race because here we have a white woman. She's a white woman. This is not about race. This is about a movement. This isn't about agenda. That's what this is about. If this happened to be a male black, we would see a different projected rhetoric right now. But what we see, it's about anti-police rhetoric, because that's where the agenda is, because it's the most tangible form of government. So to remove certain things with government, attack your local law enforcement. Again, the most tangible form of government.
So we have the traveling nurses program, right? Nurses go around, they go from state to state and they travel. Well, now we have a new funded, taxpayer funded organization that's popped up, and it's the traveling protesters. Because what we've seen in all of these cities, like Marlon said, at that chop zone, you're going to go to that chop zone, and the people that are going to be arrested and the people that are going to be identified there, they're not even going to be from Minnesota. They're not even going to be from the state. So we've had page agitators come in, and it's our tax dollars. When you see these protests, you understand that, yes, there are a lot of useful idiots in here. But the organizers of these protests and the agitators in these protests are making a lot of money that are coming in by way of taxpayer funds. They're coming into these NGOs. They're coming in by these not-for-profits, and they're paying people out. People are being paid to do this, right? This isn't an organic movement. This is, yes, are there useful idiots that are out there on social media and then are getting riled up? Yeah, mental illness is ripe in this country. It's very easy to turn up the temperature on a lot of people. I believe that poor woman was one of them. I believe she was led astray, right? And so what we need to start recognizing is what's happening with our funding here. What are we doing? This is money. This is millions of dollars being spent. Then we're spending millions of dollars in taxpayer funds to what? To police these protests, right? What else are we going to spend millions of dollars on? Arresting these individuals, prosecuting these individuals, and then what's ultimately going to happen? They're going to sue, and their local government and their state government, what are they going to do? They're going to settle with these paid protesters. And guess what? That's more tax dollars coming out of the city coffers, going to create instability in our government, in our economies, in our way of life, bring down our quality of life, and disrupt the fabric and morality of this nation. And we really got to start paying attention to it. And we shouldn't just be holding the left or the right accountable. We should be holding every single person that's in elected government or any of their appointed cronies. I don't care if there's an R in front of their name. I don't care if there's a D in front of their name. They all look like a bunch of incompetent morons to me right now. It's disgusting watching this happen, and we're all being played. We're all being played. None of this happens in a competent government. None of what we're watching. None of this happens if we had competent local and state governments. None of this happens if we had a competent federal government. We clearly don't have either.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't. And if you dispute that, also, like we mentioned earlier, Minneapolis is facing fiscal problems right now. Okay, they're facing a lot of budget issues right now, and there's a back and forth between Mayor Free and the city council right now because budget cuts need to be made. So I like I said earlier, I believe this is all that this is great for the mayor because it gets attention away from the inherent problems that the city is facing right now, and it displaces people's anger towards ICE, whereas both the left and the right of that city should be angry at their incompetent government and their moron of a mayor.
Absolute moron. And again, we also would talk about leadership. It's important that we talk about the leadership of law enforcement agencies throughout this entire country, not just politicians. Politicians have failed this country on all ends, right? Putting ICE out in the streets to lock up people in local enforcement type of tactics is completely irresponsible. Completely irresponsible to put such a high apparatus of heavily armed men and women on the streets, of America. Should be an assist and a tool to local law enforcement. But local law enforcement can't do that in these large cities because of sanctuary laws, which is a failure on political leadership. And we see it on the right also. This is just another opportunity to bring more National Guard in because of this just completely disarray of law enforcement tactics. Now, with that said, also, the other failure, which I think is even far worse, is the failure on our leadership of law enforcement agencies throughout this country, our local chiefs, police commissioners. Those type of leaders have failed this country because they're not supporting law enforcement and explaining about the mishaps and the direction that politicians are putting these law enforcement agencies in, because these law enforcement agency leaders know far better because they police streets themselves. And instead of actually giving pushback to the politicians and say, putting ICE in the streets to make these type of local law enforcement tactics is just completely putting them in a very vulnerable, dangerous situation. But even more than that, we're putting citizens in a dangerous situation. And I also think when it comes to these domestic terrorist groups, and that's what I think they are, these groups that are funding these traveling protesters. I like that term, John. That's actually pretty funny. When we talk about these traveling protesters, well, they're also pawns in this game, right? Because for them, it's just a money grab, right? It's a money grab. Some of them making maybe $30 to $40 an hour. But for the people behind it, they're pushing an agenda. So they don't care about these people. They don't care exactly what John said. This woman here, whether she's an agitator or not, she may not have the education and the knowledge to understand that when she's in a situation that is volatile with armed men and women, that she's putting herself in a deadly situation. Unfortunately, she found out the hard way, and it's tragic. But we can't blame the police officers for the fact that she's a pawn. By then, it's too late because they have to protect themselves. So we can't blame the police officers with their boots on the ground. And the reason why people do is because they are the most tangible form of government, right? But really, who should be attacked is the leadership. That's why I often say to Cop Watch, why are you surveilling the cops on the street? If you feel opposition towards the type of enforcement, intrusive police work, then you're attacking and you're surveilling the wrong people. You should be surveilling the leaders of the NYPD. And if you want to fight corruption, you should be surveilling one police plaza. I don't even know why Cop Watch surveils any cop in this entire city. Just surveil one police plaza because that's where the most corruption's happening. And it's the same thing on all levels in all different local municipalities throughout this entire country. Police officers with their boots on the ground are the most tangible form of government, and people can actually get to them. They can touch them, they can feel them, they can talk to them, they can hear them, but they don't have that access to leadership. So it's unfortunate. It's the boots on the ground that can't change legislation, but that's who gets attacked on this. So I feel sorry for many of these agitators because it's a money grab and they don't realize the situation they put themselves into. And I feel sorry for our police officers that are put in impossible situations, that have to make impossible decisions, and they get impossible solutions from impossible critics. Impossible critics that are sitting there with a fat belly on their couch saying what the police officer should do on ice. And the same person could probably not even walk onto an ice skating rink for 2 seconds without holding their own bearing and falling to the ground. But we expect our police officers armed with firearms in pressure-tested situations under high duress to make the most precarious decisions to keep everyone else safe. But what about the lives of the police officers? I guess it just doesn't count.
Yeah. What about the public? We got legend NYPD chief on here, Louis Anamone. Chief, we'd love to have you on the podcast one day when you're available. And he says it's lawful but awful. The shooting was lawful but awful. Tactics were terrible. That person should ride a desk the rest of their career. And I pulled it up on the screen a little bit earlier. The ICE agent was actually dragged prior in a similar situation. So, 100%, I believe ICE is being set up for failure by not allowing local law enforcement to partake in these operations. But the other thing that really sits with me, because today, everything's a narrative today. Everything is pushing a narrative, and the narrative never makes sense with an argument they just had. Like when we talk about the vaccine mandate, it came on the heels of my body, my choice. Right. So I was arguing with all of these politicians on the left and on the right. I was like, my body, my choice. Right. And they're like, yeah. I was like, oh, so you support my ability to not put a vaccine in my body if I don't want it. Right. Oh, no. That's different. And I'm like, no, it's not. And so, the hypocrisy in this is we're watching the left who celebrated the death of Ashley Babbitt. Ashley Babbitt was at the Capitol on January 6th. Her actions were recorded the entire time. She was actually telling people to stop damaging things and trying to stop something. A Lieutenant Michael Byrd, from far away, she was absolutely no threat to him whatsoever. She was trespassing, potentially engaging in criminal mischief. She was no threat of violence to him or another. There was no threat of serious physical injury or death right at that moment in time to himself or anyone else there. Ashley Babbitt presented none of that, but she was shot in the chest by Lieutenant Michael Byrd. And she lost her life that day during that protest that got out of hand. And again, that was another thing I watched, and I watched incompetence, pure, utter incompetence from the local law enforcement and from the Capitol Police. It was disgusting to watch. They allowed that insanity to happen. Whether they allowed it through their incompetence or they just straight up allowed it, they allowed people to take over the Capitol that day. If you had men like Louis Anamone still working on the streets of New York City or running law enforcement agencies here today, you would see how to keep order while also protecting people's First Amendment rights, because he did it flawlessly time and time again. New York City was a different city when we had people like Louis Anamone running the New York City Police Department. So Ashley Babbitt was celebrated by the left. No, she was trespassing. She was breaking the law. That shooting was justified. But in this scenario, Renee Goodman, she slams the gas with a law enforcement officer with a firearm pointed at her right in his direction, and she's shot, and they're crying bad shoot. How? If we follow the logic of January 6th, that shooting's more than good. It's more than justified. Right? So this is the thing that really bothers me with the media. This is the thing that bothers me with politics, because I don't care I'm pointing it out to the left, but I could show you example after example where they do it on the right as well. Right? And again, we're just a bunch of useful idiots that are all in the same hypocrisy, working class people arguing over the narratives that they feed us. And this is another pure example of the insanity that is the media and is American politics today.
Yeah. Just to go back on what I said, just keep in mind now that again, we haven't talked about it on our shows, but there's a lot of fraud happening in Minnesota right now. A lot of fraud, and the count last I checked was $9 billion of this $18 billion that's reported stolen. So just like the I think it's not a coincidence that there's a lot of similarities between this and what happened with Ashley Babbitt. You could compare this two situations because I think a lot of ways that incident was narrative and spin. And I mean, the incident I'm talking is of January 6th. Okay. There was a lot of narrative and spin, and it was being used by a lot of opportunists in the media and politicians to kind of uh, frame the situation a certain way. And I think when you have a place like Minnesota that's embroiled in so much fraud and so much corruption right now, the spin is being put on this right now, just like January 6th, because they don't want people looking deeper into the situation. They want people to be fighting about surface level problems, and not going into the real problems that affect your lives. Okay. And I think it's not a coincidence because we have, you know, the world that seems to be spiraling out of control when you look at the economy and you look at the job situation and you look at the markets. And I think these surface level arguments, these surface level left right divide is a great way to keep people away from looking at the issues that affect their lives on a daily basis.
It's interesting, John. I'm glad you brought up Ashley Babbitt because a while back I had done some research, right? And I actually was doing research and making comparisons, something that we spoke about a while back. I forgot. And so I had put in Ashley Babbitt into AI. You know what's interesting about that? Just to show you how subjective AI is. If you look it up in AI, it will tell you how it was a justified shooting because Ashley Babbitt breached the Capitol and she was a threat. So do we think that Ashley Babbitt was more of a threat than this woman who was operating a 4,000 to 6,000 pound vehicle while a law enforcement officer was standing on ice and got struck in front of the vehicle? So which one was more of a threat? Again, we see agenda and we see politics injected and infected in policing. As we said earlier, we say all the time that policing is supposed to be apolitical. So a lot of the rise of this platform initially also, my intentions is also to address the fact that politics has infected, injected in policing. That's how we got an overzealous civilian complaint review board. That's how we have police officers in a position where they have so much oversight externally and now even more than ever internally because the leadership of local law enforcement agencies has allowed politics to infect and inject policing. So if we make the comparison about the shooting and the death and the tragic shooting of Ashley Babbitt in comparison to this incident, I don't think that that holds water in comparison to this case, because exactly what John said earlier, Ashley Babbitt had an extreme amount of difference from the local law enforcement that actually shot her on the January 6th incident, and it was far less of a threat. And exactly that we made the observation, and we all have the information here that Ashley Babbitt was trying to bring some calm to the situation and some resolution. Was it chaotic? Yes. But if we're going to compare that incident and make some real metrics and measures, and if we compare this woman that lost her life tragically, but she was in a 4,000 to 6,000 pound vehicle, which is now a large and deadly weapon, and an encounter with police in the environment where there's ice in the streets, it's absolutely, we can't even make the comparison. So again, we're acting on emotion. I think people are far too emotionally invested. Graham versus Connor and use of force is not based on emotion. It's based on what happened in real time. It's based on perspective. So even if you have the most training in the entire world, if your perspective at that point, and as the local law enforcement officer or even ICE or any federal law enforcement officer is in that position, whatever their perspective is and what level of danger they feel they are in is what is considered reasonable or not. Is it unreasonable to believe that a man or woman acting as a law enforcement agency, federal or local, standing on ice in icy conditions, cold weather, trying to maintain order and conduct police enforcement, and someone who's been struck by a vehicle, that it's unreasonable that they would then take action and use force. For some people, they feel that a firearm is so extreme, they're just scared of guns. But yes, that is going to be the reaction. Getting struck by a vehicle is imminent, it's deadly. And again, as we said earlier, the tactics are absolutely terrible. Could the tactics be better? Absolutely. But does that take away from the fact that the shooting is justified? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It does not mitigate the fact that the shooting is justified, that this is a tragic incident. And now we have these groups that are funded playing on people's emotions, people that actually fall into the trap, that allowing themselves to be emotionally invested and not looking at this incident as a reasonable person. But we expect our police officers, who are ordinary men and ordinary women, to take the acts of superheroes. A superhero, I don't even think a superhero would be able to get off that ice unless you're Superman, to get away from that situation. But when you're standing on ice, I don't think you're running away. Has anyone here been able to run on ice and fall on your ass, especially with the firearm, and get struck by a car? So unless you're Superman and can get rocket fueled out of there, you're in a deadly situation. And it's sad, it's tragic. No police officer wants this on their head, ICE or local law enforcement, to have to carry the weight that they took someone's life and now face the red tape of what's behind it. And I tell you that right now, no police officer that I have ever served with wants that in their life. I've never worked with a police officer that wants to shoot someone and has to carry this weight and bring this home to their family. Absolutely not.
Yeah, and then the responsibility, like, from elected, I don't want to call them leaders. I don't really know what to call them at this point. Elected morons. Let's go to Jacob Fry, the boy wonder. Now we have our own boy wonder in New York City, but the boy wonder of Minnesota. He has his hand puppet sitting next to him. Now, while that chief is in shape that you're seeing, he doesn't look like a fat slob. He looks like he could actually handle himself. What that chief has been missing, and we've brought him up before, he's missing a pair of balls and a spine. And this is who rises through the rank of the police departments today, especially in big cities, big blue run cities. Men like this, men that have absolutely no spine and will let that little half man stick his hand all the way up his rectum and move his mouth for him, because, hey, he's going to make a lot of money. He's going to get a lot of notoriety. He's going to get a lot of media gigs after. He's going to get a lot of security contracts after. He's going to get a lot of consulting contracts after. And he has no care that not only is he not partaking in the core mission of policing, he's actually more of an activist and actually working against law enforcement and against public safety and law and order. So let's hear what little Jacob Fry has to say.
Republicans here in Washington criticizing those comments, saying that you're escalating tensions with that. Can you respond to them, and what do you say to them tonight, people who criticize those comments?
I'm so sorry if I offended their Disney princess ears, but here's the thing. If we're talking about what's inflammatory, on the one hand, you got someone who dropped an F-bomb, and on the other hand, you got someone who killed somebody else. F-bomb, killing somebody. I think the more inflammatory action is killing somebody. And so, once again, let's be real and just honest and straight up about what's happening here. This is not okay. The way they're coming into cities, not just Minneapolis, but around the country, is not okay. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, you should understand the importance of constitutional law enforcement. You should understand the importance of not discriminating based on race and randomly plucking people off the street because they're Somali or Latino. And especially from what we've seen, you should also understand the importance of de-escalating tense situations, not killing people and yanking out a gun. And so, again, I'm not going to preempt the investigation. It is important that we do that. And at the same time, you know, you want to make a big deal about an F-bomb, let's make a big deal about our Constitution. I think that's probably the better route.
You would have had to pay me $30 million to sit next to him. And even in that scenario, I would have been shaking my head. This guy, like this police chief, this is the problem here, is men like that. Forget the incompetent mayor. Forget the incompetent politicized boy wonder who couldn't bench. He also, I'm sure, can't bench 135 pounds. Forget him. Look at the guy that knows better, and he's like this. Disgusting. What do you think about Jacob Fry's comments? Is this inciting violence?
Yeah, absolutely is. Absolutely is. And you know what's infuriating too is that it's your own city. You know, I just don't understand why they would put their police officers in you know, why they would agitate people and put their cops in a situation having to deal with these crowds of wackos. You know, it's just unbelievable that we're getting here. But again, I think the only answer I could have for that is that they need people looking the other way and not looking at their inherent incompetence and mismanagement of their own cities. And I expect Mamdani to do the same thing here. I mean, we already see the signs that he is, because I'll talk about it next go around. He has he's kind of establishing a public fund for what seems to me like more protesters. So I expect Mamdani to do the same thing. And we've even mentioned it prior in the show that when he's failed to provide the things that he promised on the campaign trail, like the free buses, he is going to have to find some other distraction to divert the energy of his base towards, and to get them off of scrutinizing him and his inability to deliver and his incompetence. Because again, keep in mind, our city itself is facing budget problems themselves. So just like Minneapolis, he's going to have to find some creative means to get the energy of young people and people who especially voted for him and are basically leading the Democrat Party away from looking at scrutinizing him.
So I'm glad that we brought up this this imposter of a leader, which is this chief of Minneapolis here, because he's an imposter, right? He's wearing a uniform in leadership, but doesn't exemplify any leadership qualities. Now, I often talk about physical fitness being an important apparatus when you're in law enforcement, especially in uniform. You should be fit and play the part. But it's not the end-all be-all, because clearly, fitness-wise and the appearance, he fits the part, but he has no balls, no spine, as John said. I agree. And no sense of moral principle. To stand there knowing damn well, because obviously he went through the ranks and walked the streets of a city in America and actually allow this rhetoric and not even acknowledge it. Now, I'm not saying that you have to get into a full-out argument with the mayor that you work for, but you can push back. There is an art to leading people below you, but there's also an art, I used to say, to managing people above you by having civil course pushback and actually saying, well, here's my experience and here's what's necessary, and actually support the cops. And there is a point in life where you actually have to make a determination if you're going to stand up for what you believe in and continue in that career or not. If that mayor goes completely against what is actually necessary for police work to keep your people safe, to keep ICE safe, and actually to keep the residents safe, then you have to push back, even if it means career suicide. That's why we need God-fearing men in this country that are willing to put moral principle on their life and that actually believe death before dishonor. And they actually believe that moral principle is far more important than putting money in your pocket. I'm sure this chief is very happy that he gets to work out at work and do whatever he wants, and it makes a nice paycheck and allows and sits there while Jacob Fry spits out and spews out some total bullshit. And this is the same mayor that was there that allowed his city to get destroyed during the George Floyd riots. I guess we're going to go for part 2 with Jacob Fry. And this chief is just going to sit there and go, okay, maybe this is the second round that this chief is going to give up the precinct, as we saw in the first round of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Again, does he look the part? Yes, this chief. But is he playing the part? Is he acting the part? Absolutely not. So sometimes people do look the part, but they sure as hell don't fit the part.
And look, and he has my knock on federal, on what's happening in the federal government right now. Why does Minnesota still get federal funding? Why does their police department still get federal funding? They're not assisting federal officers. they're not helping and engaging in public safety, they have no business getting federal funding. Why does Jessica Tisch get federal funding? Oh, you don't believe I should be on your streets? You don't believe we should be out here? Yeah, no problem. No problem. Good luck to you. Good luck to you. You're not going to assist us in keeping your own residents safe. You're not going to keep your residents safe. Pull the federal funding. It's like I don't understand why this is hard. You know, like I don't understand what's hard about it. And here's the other boy there in New York. Let me pull him up. And he's actually going to escalate it further in New York City. He's looking to and I'm talking about oh man, what happened to my screen? I'm talking about Zohran Mamdani here. He's actually he's doubling down, not only doubling down about his anti-ICE stance, but his anti-police stance, where he doesn't even want to have the police that are best trained in handling public disorder events, which is the SRG. You could go back 2 years ago. We wrote an article, SRG at these riots, at these protests are much better suitable, much better equipped to handle them. They're much more easily identified should there be an issue than a regular average officer. And the CCRB, while they were sitting there berating the SRG, actually admitted in sworn testimony that the only reason the SRG has a higher substantiated rate of civilian complaints is because they're the only officers that they could identify in these times. So the SRG, there's no good reason other than a political reason to demonize that group and should still go on. But here's the boy wonder, and let's hear what he's got to say.
Quote, he is standing with illegal people who've broken our laws before putting New York City first. Your response?
Well, I'm not sure what she's actually referring to in that statement, because what I've been doing is standing up for each and every New Yorker across this city as the mayor of this city. And what I will not do, however, is differentiate New Yorkers on the basis of their documentation. If you live here, I am your mayor. And that is what we have been showing over these last 8 days, is a commitment to making this city more affordable for every single person who calls it home.
Her primary focus here in town was talking about the takedown of dozens of people she says are in the country illegally and affiliated with gangs. And she also encouraged you in the NYPD to work with them on those criminal prosecution efforts. Will your NYPD work with ICE on that level?
My NYPD will follow the law here in New York City. And the law, as we have it with our sanctuary city policies, allows for city government to work with the federal administration when it comes to 170 or so serious crimes if someone has been convicted of them. What it does not allow for, however, is civil enforcement or the assistance of a federal administration's attempt to fulfill its pledge to create the single largest deportation force in American history. And what I've said directly to the president, as well as what I've said to New Yorkers across the city, is that these ICE raids, they are cruel and inhumane. They do nothing to actually further the cause of public safety.
And on the issue of people protesting these ICE raids, especially after what happened in Minneapolis, we've already seen smaller protests. I believe a bigger one's actually planned for this evening. Will the strategic response group within the NYPD still be responding to protests? I know you've had some serious concerns about this, but obviously not a lot of time yet to implement that change.
I continue to share those concerns around the strategic response groups, and I continue to be committed to creating a new police response to the exercising of First Amendment rights. And what it comes back to is that this was a unit that was created initially to respond as part of counterterrorism efforts. That does not need to be conflated with the response to New Yorkers using their First Amendment rights. And so what we need to do is both keep those rights as a sanctity in New York City and keep New Yorkers safe, and I'm confident we'll be able to do that.
But as of right now tonight, there's a big protest. Will the SRG be out there because that's the option right now?
The first response that we'll have from the NYPD.
So it's totally political, and everything he's saying is bullcrap. This is exactly what Eric Adams told people in 2021. He's not going to use uniform officers to police protests. That's what he's saying. I'm going to come up with a new police response to protest. He's saying that same exact garbage that Eric Adams said. He's saying, "Oh, I'm gonna work with ICE when it comes to violent felons," which in 2021, Eric Adams was telling you ICE will never work with the New York City Police Department. The police department will never be able to harm our undocumented, and they should get free health care, and they should be given the right to vote, right? That's exactly what Zohran Mamdani's telling you, is they're New Yorkers. The police department's never going to partner with them, but will partner with them for these violent crimes. But he's lying, because they're not. Because we have people in Rikers Island, we have people in our courts every day that ICE has retainers on for violent crimes, and they're not allowing New York City government to just hand those people over to ICE. Instead, what are they doing? What is Zohran Mamdani doing? He's releasing those people back onto New York City streets. What does that do? That forces ICE to go out onto the street and to conduct these operations. Where's the NYPD? They're being held back by Jessica Tisch. And then what's happening in New York City? Where those ICE raids are conducted, all of these protesters and all of the media are being tipped off as to where these ICE raids will be conducted. And we're watching chaos on our streets. And you're going to see more actions like this because, again, everyone that's in charge of every city, every state, and our federal government are incompetent. They don't understand law enforcement. The people that do have been pushed aside because they don't want nuanced opinions. They don't want honesty. They don't want solutions. They want the problems. They don't want competent individuals in law enforcement any longer. They want leadership that's going to sit there like a good little boy and allow a man that can't pick up 135 pounds off his chest, stick his little tiny hands up your rectum and move your mouth for you.
Yeah. No, it's almost funny watching the dance that Mamdani is doing. Frey's doing it too, but he's being a little more bold. Mamdani still has to do the dance because at least we still have Wall Street here, whereas Minneapolis, again, they're losing a lot more, and they don't have anything to begin with. I mean, not to the extent of New York and having that being that financial and media capital. So Mamdani has to do the dance, and the dance is he wants to encourage the protests, but he also, he can't outright tell them to go and go and openly riot. He needs them to continue protesting because, like I said, he needs to displace their energy away from his incompetence, and but he doesn't want them to go to the extent where they're going to damage businesses in Manhattan, certainly. And then he's going to have to deal with the business community in the same way that Eric Adams has to deal with the business community. And I think in a lot of ways that business community had gotten fed up with him. In fact, I said it before that I think the reason why Tisch was even brought in because a lot of the elites in Manhattan got fed up with his incompetence and the corruption in the NYPD. And even if they're okay with some of the corruption, at a certain point they realize, hey, listen, you're drawing too much attention to the fact that we don't want, it's like the mafia. We don't want police attention. We don't want so much attention here. At a certain point you're going off the deep end. So I think it's funny watching him do that dance where he doesn't want to exactly tell his base, which are these wacky protesters. He doesn't want to tell them don't protest. He wants them to protest, but he doesn't want them to go over the deep end.
Marlon, I think you're spot on. Right? He wants the best of both worlds, right? He wants to protest. He wants to show that he's part of that movement, but he doesn't want the chaos either to say that he's failing and it's unfolding. So someone said here earlier, I don't know who it was in the comments. If you're still here, I appreciate it, that Mamdani is the face or the head of this stuff. To me, he's just a puppet. He's another hand puppet also. Mamdani, part of the Democratic Socialist Party. He is the face in New York City, but I don't believe he's actually the head of the Democratic Party. For New York City, he's the face and he's a talking and a moving mouth. But I don't think he really has any say when it comes to Democratic Socialist Party. I think he's just following a movement also, but of course on a large level in New York City. So Zohran Mamdani overseeing the NYPD. We've heard a lot of talk at this point, but we're going to see, in the coming months, once these protests start to unfold, what his real mission is and how he's going to handle it, and see if we do get all these social workers coming in, because that's the ultimate plan, right? Is to have social workers be the public safety apparatus and have the NYPD not at the top of the hierarchy when it comes to public safety. So I want to see how that plays out. I want to see this social worker, community safety, public safety team in real time. I want to see how it plays out. I want to see how they address these protests. I want to see how they address chaos in New York City. I want to see when we have social workers addressing police encounters, how they will handle it in comparison to trained local law enforcement police officers, especially when it comes to counterterrorism. What type of investigation or surveillance or intelligence will these social workers gather other than, what color people like and what their sexual orientation is? I want to see what apparatus these community public safety team actually does and what kind of work that they actually will perform. So we're just watching, I think, John, I think you said it earlier, WWE. We're watching WWE. We're watching Guiding Light, some of those soap operas. What are those? Young and Restless, General Hospital. That's what you're watching. You're watching a big soap opera here. It's all drama. And if you're Spanish, you're watching novella. That's what this is. It's just drama. It is. It's like a never-ending 30-year General Hospital soap opera that has no end, has no beginning, and it's just like it's overacting too. Like, to me, I think Zohran Mamdani, because he lacks connectivity to New York City and care and passion, to me, he's like an overactor. Like, if you can think of an overactor, I think of the guy from Miami CSI. What was his name? David something. He's just like, and now this is going to happen. Like, just an overactor. I think Zohran Mamdani is an overactor because there's no connectivity with him to New York City. He can care less. Has he actually walked the streets of New York City? He's a total elite. Someone here put in Slumdog Millionaire. Yeah, his family is involved in some, rich, wealthy stuff connected to Hollywood. He's not a New York City kid. He's not a New York City person. He can't even bench 135 pounds, which, listen, it's okay. It's okay if you're not, a physically intense person, but know who you are. He's such an overactor. We're just seeing this blanket throughout the entire population of our country. This country was built on Alpha Bravo men and Alpha Bravo women, and we don't see that anymore. You look at Jacob Fry, you look at Zohran Mamdani, and that's starting to become the template, right? I think that this whole idea of pushing away from toxic, this whole idea of toxic masculinity and moving away from rugged individualism, as Marlon had spoke about in our last podcast.
Zohan said it.
Right?
Yeah,
we're getting these men who can't bench 135 pounds because we're moving away from the Alpha Bravo men. Yeah. We're just weakening our environment. Then we have a chief like that in Minneapolis who's built like a bull, but he walks like a sheep. So does it matter if you have all that muscle behind you if you're not willing to use it? It means nothing, right? If you have a high-powered car and the cylinders aren't working, well, it's not going to fire. And when it comes to that chief and all the leaders in this country that are weak, you're firing on no cylinders.
Look, if you can't pick 135 pounds off your chest as a male, you probably can't be a rugged individual. If you never earned $1 a day in your life and had to go out there and work, you probably can't be a rugged individual. So you probably are intimidated by people that actually are, right? And that's the real thing, is that like this we want to get away from rugged individualism for the warmth of collectivism. Okay. Go back to where you came from, bro. I'm going to make that comment, and that ain't a racist comment. That's where you're from, right? You could get that warmth of collectivism from behind your family's gated enclave that you guys got, and you could have that. This is America. The rights of the individual. So, absolute gross. There was a lot of comments in here. I'm sorry, I'm really far behind on these comments, but a lot of people were asking thoughts on mask policy. So I'm going to say again, I support law enforcement. I support ICE. I support ICE going out there and enforcing federal immigration law. I really like the mask for me thing. It's like I as a law enforcement officer in New York City, we weren't allowed to be masked. And if that's the standard that we're held to, then I believe that's the standard that should be held to for our federal law enforcement as well. Our names and our badges need to be identifiable should there be an incident. And I believe that's the same standard that should apply for any law enforcement agency, whether they're federal or not. I've had the case made by a bunch of people who said that ICE's job is more dangerous than local law enforcement. And that to me is absolutely ridiculous. I think they have a very dangerous job, and I'm not for any second trying to throw shade at their job at all. They're dealing with very dangerous people, the same very dangerous people that our local law enforcement deal with. The difference between most federal law enforcement and agencies is they do move around a lot. They go to different cities. Where local law enforcement, you're literally combating crime and you're dealing with violent criminals right where you live. Meaning you're going to work and then you're going home and you're taking your wife and your kids shopping and you're running into the same individuals that you just dealt with on the streets while you were conducting your job. That's not true for a lot of other law enforcement agencies. It could be true for ICE. The bigger issue for me, bigger than the masks, is I do believe that law enforcement agencies should be readily identified. The law enforcement officers should be readily identifiable. That doesn't mean that you need to know where they live or their kids go to school or anything else like that. That just means that you need to know, like, hey, I dealt with Macari, whether you see that I'm bald and ugly or you don't. You know that you dealt with Macari with my shield number and you could file a complaint on me or you could sue me or you could do whatever else because that is your right as an individual. I'm not some guy that's unaccountable. If you don't know who I am, I could be held completely unaccountable for my actions. And with great power comes great responsibility. So I believe they need to be identifiable when it comes to filing complaints or filing litigation against law enforcement officers or anything like that. Do I think you need to know where I live, where I go to school, or if I'm ugly or not? I don't really, not a huge issue for me. It's the shield number and the name that are big issues for me. That has to be out on everybody's uniform. But again, in New York City, we don't wear masks. We weren't allowed to wear masks. And if you're going to try to make the case that we don't need to, but other agencies do, that fails on its face. It's the same thing for me when I look at these chiefs who haven't put their hands on people in 20 years or these deputy commissioners, and they have a security detail. It's like, how is your job more dangerous than the detective in gun violence? How is your job more dangerous than the sergeant or lieutenant in gun violence? Why do you need to do that? And then the same thing when we look at the body cameras. Every law enforcement officer needs to wear a body camera, but a chief doesn't. Why? If every law enforcement, they're sitting there, they're up on the news, they're telling you you need to wear a body camera, then okay. Put your money where your mouth is. Strap your body camera on and be held to the same exact standards that you're holding your employees to. So it's either there's a policy across the board or there's not. And when I look at the policy across the board, I'd rather not have masked rogue men running around that aren't identifiable. I'd rather people be unmasked and identified. Again, when it comes to the mask, less concerned about that, more concerned about being identified. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Yeah, I think the mask, the problem with the mask speaks of the overall ineffectiveness of their strategy. Because like we said, it's going to take them 37 years to round up the at least 12 million illegals in this country. Okay. I think, showing up in certain neighborhoods like an army, when these neighborhoods already hate a lot of them already hate law enforcement. All right. And we already know their feelings towards illegals, that they're pro-illegals, in one way or the other. So showing up with masks, I just don't think is helping the situation. Yeah, I think I think the overall problem here is like Eric said about Mamdani. He's trying to get to. You can't have it both ways. You can't. The problem with this situation is the federal government is handling it wrong. Okay, you can't in terms of Trump, you can't say I'm going to drain the swamp and then you turn the other way and not face the situation going on with protesters and the fact that a lot of elites and a lot of NGOs that get federal money, government dollars, are now funding this problem. You can't go in and say you're going to drain the swamp and turn the other way when the swamp is making life miserable in a lot of these big cities. You can't have it both ways. And by the way, you're seeing that same thinking of wanting it both ways in other policy. Like you can't say, you can't acknowledge the problem of young people not being able to afford houses, and then you say, oh, let's bring in 50-year mortgages. Oh, I'm gonna buy $200 billion worth of mortgage bonds. Because that's not helping the situation. You cannot have it both ways. You're gonna have to pick. You can't enrich Wall Street while saying that we need to bring back manufacturing in America. You're gonna have to pick one. And the problem with these government officials is they want it both ways, and they think they can manage both ways. So in the case of like Mamdani, you think you could do this dance with the protesters, and they're not going to escalate these protests into a possible riot and damage businesses in Manhattan. You can't have it both ways. You can't get rid of SRG and think that regular patrol cops who aren't trained or equipped for these protesters are going to be able to handle it. You're going to have to pick, and if you don't pick soon, the circumstances of history are going to pick it for you. And again, in the case of Mamdani, at least, I think I have a suspicion he may end up another one-term mayor.
We can only hope so. If your mouth to God's ears, let's hope he's a one-term mayor. There's no doubt about it. SRG is an appointed apparatus. At one time, it was called Task Force, and before that, it had a different name. And the point is not the name of it. The point is what they do. It's a mobile field force that has specialized, specific training. And in my opinion, to address these protests in New York City, that at any point can turn into riots, and they often do. And they're always teetering on that fine line. Require a law enforcement apparatus that's specifically trained for that and is mobile and can move at any time, especially in New York City, where we're short-handed and short-staffed right now, where we don't have the manpower to address unpredictability. And that's what happens in New York City. New York City is a chaotic place. It's a great place, right? It's the economic center of the world. It's a place with awesome food, but the same token, it is a chaotic environment also. And unpredictability is what New York City thrives on. And the police department has to be able to handle that. And that's with men and women that have specialized training, and that's SRG. We removed SRG, which was once formerly Task Force, and I think it was another name at some point. The point is that they're a mobile field force, specifically trained for this. And with that being said, if SRG is not an apparatus and it's removed from New York City, we have some serious problems. And I also asked the question, if SRG is going to be removed, what about counterterrorism? Is that the next thing on the chopping block? Because terrorists, domestic or foreign, is still a major threat to New York City. So, Marlon, I hope you're right. Hope he's a one-term mayor.
Did you guys answer about the mask, though, either of you?
Yeah. I don't agree with the mask. I said that.
No, I didn't answer that.
The mask. The problem with the mask is that it's a product of the overall poor strategy of ICE. It's just part of it, and all it's doing is inflaming the situation.
I think I agree with the sentiments of Marlon. I think that the mask is unnecessary, right? I think a police officer's face should be exposed. Not necessarily your name. I don't think that has to be exposed, your name, but I think at least your face, right? Because you're wearing a uniform, you're a representative of an organization, you have this authority. Your face should be exposed also because of transparency, right? You should have the confidence to carry out your job because you know the law and no need to hide your face. I think that hiding your face actually creates more of a volatile environment also. I think that actually, rather than de-escalate situations, I think it actually escalates it. I think the mask is a terrible idea.
And if I can, I think part of the reason why a lot of those agents are wearing masks is because they themselves know that the ineffectiveness of their strategy and how it's all it's doing is angering people and it's going to make them targets. So meaning that a lot of them themselves know that they are kind of being put in a precarious situation and are going to be the targets themselves of these angry leftists.
No, look, I agree, but like, I agree with what people being upset about it. And I understand. I think it actually escalates the situation. I do. So I understand why a lot of people are asking about it. I think it do. But speaking about escalating a situation, we consistently say here that law enforcement should be apolitical. Law enforcement should not go with the trend. Our overall message should be to lower the temperature, not turn it up, right? And what we're seeing across the country, especially in big cities, is that these police chiefs, and Shell commented on this one, but he was just as guilty of stuff like this. Maybe not at this tone and not like this. I've never seen him do anything this egregious, but I've seen him speak out against the use of ICE and against the use of the federal government in New York City, and how and support not going along with ICE. So now that he's out, he's singing a completely different tune, right? After post Eric Adams getting indicted, he completely shifted his rhetoric the same way that Eric Adams did. So I never seen it this egregious in New York. Definitely not this unprofessional, but this is what happens when you appoint people who didn't earn it, because they don't understand their mission. They don't understand the gravity of their words. They don't understand that not only is she endangering ICE agents, she's endangering her own members of the Philadelphia Police Department. And she's also, by doing that, she's endangering the public, and she's turning the temperature up. Listen to this disgrace of a police chief. Absolutely disgusting. For Nincompoop, this one's for you. This is if I put up DEI in a dictionary, didn't earn it, or as I like to call it, DIE, diversity, diversity, equity, and inclusivity. If I put that in a dictionary, her photo should come up, because she clearly didn't earn it, and she's only there because she's a black female. Because this is ridiculous. These words are inflammatory. They're disgusting. Nobody in politics, in elected office, or that dons a uniform should ever speak like this and talk about this like of any incident. This is, even if she totally didn't agree with it and thought it was wrong, this is not how you do something. This is inflaming riots on her own streets. She's a moron.
Good afternoon. I'm Rochelle Bilal, the sheriff for the city and county of Philadelphia. And I say her name, Renee Good. Renee Good. Renee Good. Renee Good. Renee Good. Renee Good. This should not have happened, but we're here today. Let know that law enforcement professionals, real ones, not the fake made up ICE, probably Trump's new army to attack citizens of the United States. Did you hear what I said? No law enforcement professional wears a mask. None. None. Those that come into our communities wearing a mask to commit crime, thank God for our district attorney, Larry Krasner, who said he's going to lock them up. And I'm saying now, we are not going to whisk you away for them to hide your identity. Because when you do it there, you're getting arrested there. No whisk away for them to hide you. None of that here.
I mean, what do you think? Is this was that a clear message? Did you even understand what she was saying? To me, when I first heard it, I thought she was saying that she's going to arrest ICE agents who wear masks. But now that I'm listening to it over and over again, she's saying she's not going to allow ICE to whisk you away, masked. How are you not going to allow this? And this to me goes back to during the election and debates with Andrew Cuomo being up on that stage and saying that he was going to use the NYPD to stop ICE. This is what this police chief's doing. And most of you moron Republicans and moron conservatives and moron Democrats were like, let's get Andrew Cuomo in there. We need him to save us from these radical leftists, when he himself was pushing radical leftist policies that were insane. This is what Andrew Cuomo supported. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Show me an incompetent chief, right? Show me an incompetent chief, and I'll show you a municipality that's in trouble right now. Okay, it's it just you look at all of them from Chicago, San Francisco, Denver, New York, Philadelphia. Show me all of them. Show me an incompetent chief who's running it now, and I'll show you fiscal problems coming. Okay, they all have it. They all have it. So all of their mayors put these morons in charge. Okay, who are going to be who know they got there because of DEI and because they're not they're not competent for those roles. Okay, so those people are gonna do and say exactly what the mayor wants. Okay, they're gonna do and say exactly what the mayor wants, and in these cases the mayors don't want you looking at them. Okay, and so it's not a coincidence. And by the way, the picture I just showed you is that Philadelphia is running out of money. They're running out of money, running out of those federal funds that they've been using to plug revenue holes for the last couple of years.
You know what's interesting about this? If you look at these pandering leaders that allow politics to infect and inject their police department, weak leadership cowards that make these inflammatory statements, they all have something in common. Their cities are failures. Philadelphia is a failure. Philadelphia, which was once a prominent and thriving city, right? The city of brotherly love, looks far from brotherly love. If you look at some areas of Philadelphia, it looks like areas of third world countries you wouldn't even want to walk in. So that's the common denominator. Chiefs like that are in cities that are just completely failed and disarray. You look at places like Florida where they're thriving, and some of these sheriffs there that are completely pro common sense and pro public safety are in thriving communities where people are leaving New York and leaving Philadelphia to go move there, not just because it's sunny beach and beautiful weather, but because it's a place that makes sense, right? There was a time that Philadelphia, New York, and other places made sense, and being cold was just, was just a byproduct of living in places like that. But now, being cold sucks when it's cold outside and everything looks terrible. It's just a complete failure. So look around, complete failures. And that's why I said earlier, these weak cowards like that chief before, with the big set of biceps, but a small brain and small ability to have leadership, and this inflammatory statements, they are all imposters because they're imposters of what chiefs should be. And the language that they're using is so inflammatory. Say her name, say her name. What you're doing is you're injecting more emotion and more sadness into people, and you're putting more emphasis. You didn't say the cop was wrong, but you said it subliminally. And that is inflammatory. You're a chief who had your boots on the ground, who understands policing, but you want to pander to your politicians that you work for because you want to put more money in your pocket, more stars on your shoulder, and pave the way for your offspring. Absolutely terrible what we watch in front of our faces. 2 hours and 30 minutes into it, this is a hell of a podcast. And again, I think John said it earlier when we started, and I agree. Nowhere else will you get this fair assessment and this type of perspective from, unlike the Finest Unfiltered, and the combination with our friends and family and visitors and that are part of this engagement. And we're all having a real conversation. And many things can be true at one time. This is tragic. It's sad. It shouldn't happen. But it's also true that the police, whether it's federal or local, have to act and protect themselves also. So while this is ugly, it's justified. It's justified while we have these chiefs, fake chiefs, that go around and pretend that the police department is a complete failure and pander to their leadership while they fail to tell them that they're the ones that are destroying it and creating this environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Who's this? John Wensdover. He says, is critical response still around? Doubt that. So what's been happening is, if you remember early on in the Adams administration, he was going to disband the critical response team, which is they're the supplement to ESU responding to active shooters and counterterrorism situations, followed by the strategic response group, the SRG. Now, we had put that out, that was what was going to happen. And then, so what Eric Adams did is he pulled back doing so. I think he was going to decrease their numbers by about 80% due to the high level of attrition and the high amount of people that were resigning, retiring early, and retiring. So what he did was he went with his original plan on how he was going to lower the overall head count of the NYPD and how to follow along with the defund the police agenda. He used defund through attrition, meaning as people leave the CRC, they do not get replaced. And so that's what they've been doing. So the CRC, they don't get training anymore. They're being taken away from day-to-day resources in the NYPD, being pulled out of deployment plans and things like that. The SRG is still in all those deployment plans. The boy Wonder clearly doesn't know that because he doesn't know NYPD policy and what's happening. But them too, they're also being defunded through attrition, the SRG. So while they're all still there, they're not really, they're holding on a thin straw, as we heard in that interview, is that he had doubled down on that he's going to get rid of the SRG. He doubled down days prior, like literally hours prior, on an interview where he said he's going to get rid of the SRG, even though he kept Jessica Tisch. And again, we pointed it out when we did the last episode with the first press conference of the year with Tisch, LaPetri, and Mondani up there and Hochul, where that was the one question reporters should have asked him, and it wasn't asked, and it should have been asked to Jessica Tisch, because if she believes in public safety, what's her thoughts on the SRG? You know, and we haven't heard that, and we haven't heard any media willing to ask her, because again, she has a stronghold over the media. It's really, at this point, we have like state-run controlled media in New York and across the country, you know. And so here's the boy Wonder again. Now he is 100 and can't bench 135 pounds, but he is a tactical law enforcement tactician. The trust fund and growing up in the lap of luxury have afforded him the ability to now be a tactician also. So let's hear what he's got to say about ICE.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was there in your city defending this ICE agent from Minneapolis in this shooting. She said that he, quote, followed his training. Is that what you saw in those videos?
If that is following his training, then I think there are larger questions about the training that's being provided to ICE agents. I think we can all see that video and come to our own conclusions that ICE agent murdered a woman in Minneapolis. And it is a glimpse into what has been a year full of cruelty. And I think what many New Yorkers woke up with feeling today was a heightened sense of anxiety and fear as to whether they were safe in leaving their homes. I know that's especially true for immigrant New Yorkers, of which there are more than 3 million, including myself. And it is clear to myself and to so many across this country, as I've shared with the president directly, that these ICE raids are cruel and inhumane, and they do nothing to further the cause or the interest of public safety.
You called this a murder just now. You said that also yesterday. The mayor of Minneapolis hasn't yet said that. Why go that far before the investigation is completed?
That was the conclusion I came to just in watching that video. And I think that many Americans came to that same conclusion. No matter how many times this is mischaracterized by others, we will see right what is in front of us, which is that a 37-year-old woman was killed by an ICE agent, and she leaves behind children, she leaves behind her family, she leaves behind an entire community and a city that will mourn her. And this is something that was entirely preventable. And it is yet, however, unsurprising to see from an agency that is both reckless and also operates with a real sense of impunity across the country.
Homeland.
Dangerous rhetoric coming out of Mondani. Dangerous. He's labeling it a murder. We clearly went through the Department of Justice standards, and he's going on his emotions, not fact or law. And this is, again, just another site of, 1 million people, over 1 million people casted a ballot to put a 33-year-old rich kid in charge of the greatest city in the world, in charge of the largest municipal police force in the world. And he doesn't even understand use of force policy, nor does he understand use of force law, because if he did, he would have at least cited some of it. And clearly here, he's acting on emotions and not logic and not anything based in facts.
Yeah. I think they're all following some sort of script, And you look at the similarities between him and Frey and like certain issues like that keep coming up now, like the the down, like crime all of a sudden is down nationwide, and down in a lot of cities. And there's already been questions about, we know what's happening in DC. There's been questions about Chicago. There's obviously questions we brought up about what's happening in New York. I think these guys are all following the same script, and that script is to again hide and divert your attention from their own problems and malfeasance in government.
So I think it's interesting, right? Zohran Mamdani, who's now became a tactician of law enforcement, he can't bench 135 pounds, but he thinks that a police officer struck by a vehicle should be able to push that vehicle or stop that vehicle and get out of the way. So a man that can't bench 135 pounds makes the assessment that the police officer didn't act properly. That's interesting. One thing I learned from one of my jiu-jitsu coaches is no matter how much training you have, I don't care how much training you have, you're not going to be able to stop a gorilla. And when someone is driving a car, I don't care how much training you have, and they strike you with that car, there's not much you can do. But Zohran Mamdani, who can't bench 135 pounds, he has the solution. Everyone who's never done police work has the solution. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. The least amount that you do something, the more you think you could do it. So apparently Zohran Mamdani doesn't think it's necessary to be able to bench 135 pounds, which is not even what his weight is, right? I think a man is supposed to bench one and a half times of their weight to show that they're actually in healthy condition, is making the assessment that they didn't follow proper training. Great. This is what we came to, right? This country has become politicians of Jacob Fry's and Zohran Mamdani's, just completely emasculated. This is the template, right? This is what we're telling our young. This is what you need to grow into. Don't bench 135 pounds, but you should be able to stop a car and handle chaotic situations, because apparently being fit is not necessary. Being strong is not necessary, but having ridiculous ideology, that's what's important. Live in a fantasy, right? We're living this fantasy. You don't need to work out, but somehow you're magically, police officers are trained though, right? Great. Thank you, Zohran Mamdani. I really learned a lot. I really appreciate it.
If he's such an expert on policing, then why did he put Tish initially under Dean Fullahan, his first deputy mayor? If he cares about policing and he has such an interest in it and he's such an expert in it, then why did he give it to his first deputy mayor? And we know now he rescinded that after the outcry, that Tish was seemingly demoted.
Supposedly he rescinded it. Supposedly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. That this guy Nin, dude, he's hysterical, bro. He like next podcast I'm wearing my Waylon Jennings shirt. For those of you that don't like outlaw country, it's good. You got to put a little outlaw country on, a little Waylon baby. All right. So he is a former NYPD police chief, Rodney Harrison. Rodney Harrison was one of the first, I believe, actually the first law enforcement official that came out in support of Zohran Mamdani's public safety plan. So let's hear what Rodney has to say.
CBS News law enforcement contributor Rodney Harrison joins me now. Rodney, thank you for being here. And I'm going to read a little bit more about the policy because I want to ask you about this. I know we're going to be dissecting this over the days, weeks, and months to come. But according to DHS policy, the use of deadly force must be objectively reasonable in light of the facts and circumstances. And the guidelines go on to say, officers may use deadly force only when necessary, when the law enforcement officer has a reasonable belief that the subject of such force poses an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury to the law enforcement officer or another person. Deadly force cannot be used to stop someone who is fleeing, though it is authorized when an officer believes that someone who's trying to escape poses a serious threat to the officer or others. Will this come down to the state of mind of the officer in question?
Absolutely. But the one thing that I think that I did not hear you say is, was there a reasonable alternative? And just based upon the video and the things that I've seen and through my 30 years in law enforcement experience, what I saw was there was a possible alternative for the officer. I am concerned about some of the tactics the officer, the agent standing in front of the vehicle. But then it comes down to the officer, and did he feel that a judgment needed to be made regarding stopping what he might have deemed a deadly physical assault on himself. So there should be an external independent investigation from the Minnesota State Attorney's Office, but there are some concerns regarding the policies. There are some concerns regarding the tactics, and unfortunately, the most important thing, there needs to be a stronger level of sympathy for the Good family for the life that was lost in this incident.
What do you mean by that?
Well, what you see is a lot of finger pointing. A lot of people are making accusations that this subject, Mrs. Good, was using the vehicle to ram the agent, but you don't hear any sympathy from the administration towards the family. So, when you have incidents like this, this is what stirs up protests that turn into violent protests that may even rise to another level. So one of the best things that needs to happen here is, one, be a little bit more transparent, a little bit more sympathetic, and then also take a look at if there is a need for accountability.
Let's talk about the accountability part. We heard Governor Walz say it feels now very difficult that we will get a fair outcome because people in positions of power, from the president to the vice president to Noam, have told you things that are verifiably false. We know the Minnesota Bureau of Investigation said the FBI is blocking the agency from accessing key information. How typical or atypical is that?
Well, this is an uncommon occurrence. I can't recall an incident where you had a federal agent using deadly physical force in a situation like this. But I will say this, there definitely needs to be, and I shared this before, an independent investigation from the state attorney's office, somebody that could take a closer look at it. And once again is this, I don't want to sit here and challenge the officers as of yet. He might have felt that his life was in danger and there was a need for him to use deadly physical force. Further investigation will reveal the truth, but there's still a lot more answers, questions that need to be answered going forward regarding the policy, the tactics, and could something else alternatively been done to avoid this incident from occurring the way he did.
At this point, do you think that whether it's the FBI or the state attorney general's office doing this investigation, do you think that that will satisfy the public at large? You said that there needs to be an independent investigation, but there is so much distrust right now from either side, depending on where you sit on the political aisle.
And it's going to get worse because what you're seeing is, once again, a lot of finger pointing, a lot of people on both sides blaming the other party, and nobody's taking into consideration the family that lost a loved one. And if we could kind of get a little bit more of a better job of engagement, understanding, sympathy, I think there could be a little bit of a better trust factor going forward. But as of right now, what you're hearing from the administration and the other things of that seem to be somewhat even callous, how can the public go forward trusting that something that there'll be an appropriate investigation regarding the incident that happened in Minneapolis?
Rodney Harrison, thank you. CBS.
That was hard to listen to. Holy shit. I actually thought he was a decent speaker until I actually heard this. Timesheets Harrison is just not on the level. Like, he's just not. Like, honestly, I see that he was not engaged in the core mission of policing. He was engaged in what Tariq Shepard said, making connections, furthering his political clout, because he didn't even know what he was talking about. You could need to feel more sympathy. So what are you saying, Rodney? What are you saying? We should go out across, allow people to obstruct law enforcement activities, and then when they get really mad and start to yell, we should all take a knee? Because that's what I heard. I heard Ronnie trying to play both sides of the aisle while bashing the administration. Oh, and talking about sympathy. Like, I thought that was an absolute joke. Anyone that's like, oh, yeah, Rodney Harrison should be the police commissioner, That interview should have removed all of that from you, because what I heard is a guy who's not even well-spoken, has no idea what he's talking about, and has no business running law enforcement because, again, he doesn't have a spine. He's no different than that white guy sitting next to Jacob Fry. They're political hacks. He just wants to get in with the in crowd, or maybe he wants to be the next John Miller on CNN, pushing whatever narrative they want him to push, even though he doesn't believe in himself.
Yeah. I expect nothing different from Rodney. Okay, keep in mind, Rodney, when the initial mandate dropped in November of 2021, Rodney was chief of department. Okay, Rodney didn't speak up then. Rodney didn't. Did you push back against any of this, Rodney? Okay.
No, he probably just got an exemptions for his daughter and then got them to second grade without them ever having to do a fucking stitch of police work. That's what Rodney did.
That's what it's about. Handshakes, kisses, and promises.
Yeah. So it's no surprise now we get like milk toast Rodney here with his refusal to take a principal position on any of this and be forthright. You know what really sucks? I don't understand these guys because they have all the money in the world, like John Chow, who makes $30K a month, yet they can't get on camera and be forthright and be honest. Because they refuse to upset their progressive masters. At no point in there does Rodney say that law enforcement, the lives of officers are not expendable. We must have sympathy for the family, but when are we going to mention that cops are not expendable here? Okay, you cannot. When are we going to put the responsibility and the onus on the people who escalate these situations and then put their own lives in a precarious position? Okay. Well, when are we going to do that? It's never going to come from guys like him, because saying that out loud risks angering their progressive masters. So he always has to put the onus on law enforcement and never on the personal responsibility of the people who make these incidents go sideways to begin with.
That's the Bill Bratton playbook. That's right. Yeah, he built the public safety grift. Never mentioned the politicians. Never mentioned them. That's the Bill Bratton playbook you heard.
So I've been following Rodney Harrison for quite some time right now, because I heard about the scuttlebutt that I heard about Rodney Harrison is all this great stuff. He's such a great chief, so intelligent, so great. I've heard a lot of great things about him. Always such a nice guy. So I started to follow Rodney Harrison's career. And what I found was he's a nice guy like many others. He has the nice guy syndrome. But what I saw initially, when I saw Rodney Harrison on the new Mike Taven podcast with Mike Colon, and I saw Rodney Harrison speak about Daniel Pantaleo. And he said that Daniel Pantaleo got a raw deal. And he said two things at the same time. Daniel Pantaleo got a raw deal, but we have to be sorry for Eric Garner's family. But what he didn't do is he didn't say that Daniel Pantaleo got a raw deal when he was an active chief of the NYPD. When Daniel Pantaleo got terminated, he said nothing. Just like all these weak coward chiefs, he allowed him to get terminated. And I was met with opposition when I said, damn this guy, because he didn't say a word about it. Well, he said, it would have been career suicide. Well, sometimes it has to be career suicide, because for Daniel Pantaleo, it was suicide for his entire life, for his family and for Daniel Pantaleo. So it may have had curtailed his career, but would have showed moral principle, and that would have been a step backwards, but eventually that would have been 4 steps forward. What did I also see watching Rodney Harrison? I saw another cuck coward from the NYPD. It must be a necessary template. When you rise in the ranks, they must ask you, are you willing to cut off your balls? Yes. Are you willing to wear a ball gag? Yes. Would you let people stick fingers up your ass? Yes. Welcome to the NYPD. You now got a star on you. You become a chief, and you become a complete cuck. And are you willing to go on your knees? Yes. So what I saw just now, you know what I saw? I saw a job interview. That's what that was. So Zohran Mamdani, if you're watching, that was a job interview. That was Rodney Harrison interviewing to be one of your police commissioners or top staff under your administration. So Rodney Harrison, congratulations. In my opinion, it looks like the finger in the ass and the ball gag and getting on your knees and being a total cuck coward has allowed you to get an opportunity to become part of this administration. Welcome, Rodney Harrison. Good luck. I hope you get the job.
Yeah, it's sick, dude. So look, before we get to the super chats, just one last thing, because I think it's important. We touched on it a little here, like the dissolution of the strategic response group in the NYPD. I just want to go on what Mondani's reasoning is behind that and just get you guys' thoughts on what you think about disbanding the strategic response group, especially at this time when the NYPD is experiencing an unprecedented level of protest. And I don't think that is just exclusive to the NYPD. It's every major law enforcement agency across the country. And they're all coming up with these reactionary police response forces to moments of public unrest. And that's what the SRG does. You know, when we saw the mass shooting on Park Avenue, SRG was the first on scene. If there's a mass shooting, if there's a terrorism attack, more than likely the patrol officers and the strategic response group are going to be the first officers on scene, as well as the strategic response group backfills for patrol officers, act as the old NYPD task force used to. So I believe it's so ingrained into public safety right now. I don't even believe they could effectively get rid of it. And if they do, it's going to open up a large public safety gap and leave the public very vulnerable to acts of terrorism, to periods of civil unrest, and to other emergency situations, whether it be natural or man-made, right? And so let's hear what he's got to say. This is literally hours before him being sworn in. I believe this was on December 30th. He does this interview on Vox. Here you go.
My decision in retaining Commissioner Tisch is a decision on the basis of looking at her record of coming into an NYPD that the Adams administration had stacked the upper echelons of with corruption and incompetence.
So I just want to stop right there. You could clearly tell he's a fan of the Finest Unfiltered. That's why he came on. Because let me just go back and play that one more time again. Because
John, that needs a redo.
Even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? And here's one of those times, right?
My decision in retaining Commissioner Tisch is a decision on the basis of looking at her record of coming into an NYPD that the Adams administration had stacked the upper echelons of with corruption and incompetence, and starting to root that out while lowering crime across the 5 boroughs. Making this decision not only in recognition of that, but also to fulfill the larger public safety vision that we had laid out over the course of the campaign, which focused on the creation of a Department of Community Safety that will tackle mental health crisis, the homelessness crisis. This is also a decision that is not one that is in tension with the commitments I've made specific to the NYPD, like the disbanding of the strategic response group.
Those things still happen.
That still happens. And I think that's what's important to make clear to New Yorkers, is that the things that we campaigned on around the disbanding of the SRG, the creation of the DCS, these are still things that we will fulfill. We will do so with the teams that we're building.
So, you know, the funny part about it, this is like, at what point do you guys even see any of this happening? Because I don't know how that gets done. I don't, like, right now, there are protests on the streets of New York. For every night since he's been the mayor, there have been multiple protests on the streets of New York. And guess who's out there policing those protests? The strategic response group. So it really falls on its face. And like, what is that Department of Community Safety? Now that not only are they going to respond to emotionally disturbed calls, they're also going to police protests. I mean, is anyone seeing that, like, his little theory isn't going to really come to fruition here? Because even last night there was multiple officer involved shootings last night in New York City, but there was one with a mentally disturbed person in a hospital where there were social workers and trained medical professionals in there, and they weren't able to de-escalate it. And guess who they called? They called the big boys. They called the NYPD. They called armed men and women to come there with guns and training, and they had to meet deadly physical force with deadly physical force, and that perpetrator met his demise. Whether it was because of mental illness or not, I don't know all the details of that. But the fact of the matter is, you know, his rhetoric may have sounded good to some people, to some of you lefties, you anti-police people, but when you on paper, but when you actually want to put into fruition, I don't know. I don't see it happening. What are you guys' thoughts about what he's saying about how they're supposed to fight counterterrorism when they are part of the counterterrorism solution? And do you ultimately foresee Strategic Response Group really being pulled away, or are they just going to get rebranded under a different name? Like, what are you guys' thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, go ask the nurses and doctors in that hospital now if they think SRG should be removed. I mean, I think it was Patrol that responded, but considering that SRG is the response to like an active shooter, or like imagine that guy was rampaging throughout the hospital. Okay, the Patrol might have been asked to. I mean, SRG might have been asked to respond there. Okay, now, you bring up a good question, whether this will actually happen. I don't know. It's a very good question. I'm not sure I could answer it here personally. He may delay this for as long as he can and keep telling his base that it's going to happen. But I think he would be absolutely a moron to get rid of SRG now. And in fact, if I'm a business owner in Manhattan, the minute you tell me you get rid of SRG, I'm looking for a new lease in Miami. Okay, because it's only a matter of time. Do you really want to go through that summer of love again? What was it, 2 or 3 nights when your stores were getting just invaded by vandals and thieves? Do you really, when after protests like went off the deep end, because those all started out as protests, right? Do you really want that for your business? Okay, I think it would be strategically stupid of him to get rid of it, and to basically he would be doing the equivalent of Eric Adams shooting himself in the foot by getting rid of, forcing out thousands of senior cops at a moment when you knew crime was already on the rise from the latter years of the Kelly Bloomberg administration. And then you get rid of thousands of experienced personnel only to see crime continue spiking, and then you have to create a unit of young inexperienced CRT guys who you tell to go break the law in order, you tell them to go off the deep end of enforcement in order to quell a lot of this spike in crime. So I'm not entirely sure it's going to happen, but I hope the business community, if you're one of these wealthy Manhattan elites with stakes in Manhattan, you got a business there, I hope you're paying attention, and I hope you're using your influence to tell this guy don't do anything stupid.
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that he's got the right police commissioner for what I think is going to happen. Sa Greco likes to say the soccer mom, but I like to say she's the queen of rebrand. So there's no doubt in my mind it's going to be a rebrand when it comes to SRG. They'll probably have different uniforms, right? Because we don't want scary looking uniforms. We don't want SRG in tactical uniforms with big guns, because the guys with the guns are scary, right? Those are the evil people in the streets of New York City. According to Zohran Mamdani said it himself, right? The bad guy with the gun is the NYPD cop in uniform. So it's probably going to be a rebrand. It'll probably be social workers or maybe cops wearing pink with ball gags, and they'll be mobilized with their ball gags in their mouth to handle these protests. There's no doubt about it. It will be a complete rebrand. Maybe they'll call it, I don't know, CSU, Community Safety Unit, or Community Safety Mobilization, whatever. But it's not going to go away. It's just going to be rebranded, and it's going to have a different appearance, right? Mm-hmm. So people don't see rugged individualism or rugged organization. They'll see, pink ball gags. Maybe they'll wear scrubs like they're in a hospital, and they'll address it like that. Maybe they won't carry firearms. Maybe they'll carry like foam pool noodles they use when you go out swimming. They'll have pool noodles. There'll be armored pool noodles and pink scrubs with ball gags, and they'll be the ball gag unit. So that's probably what's going to happen. But it definitely, he has the right police commissioner for that. Queen of rebrand. They rebrand everything. Just going to give it a whole new name, because Zohran Mamdani, while he may be the ideology behind him, I think it's just ideology. Mm-hmm. Say that 10 times. It's completely radical, but he's also not stupid, and he knows damn well he can't get rid of this, especially when right now you have paid protest on a daily basis in New York City. It's not going anywhere. It's not going away, especially with with the crisis that we had and the shortened manpower in this police department that we have right now. So Thank you very much. Look forward to pink ball gags, pink scrubs, and pool noodles.
Absolutely. So look, before we get into super chats, I just want to thank everybody for joining us. We had about 600-700 people on here this morning. Thanks for, the thoughts, whatever, left, right, in the center, who cares? We appreciate all your opinions. But if you guys could do us a favor, move us up in the algorithm. We're trying to get to 100,000 subscribers. If you guys could share out this thing. And then if you're listening to this podcast later on, if you could do the boost button, I forget exactly what it's called. Why I keep drawing a blank on this. But there's a thing that'll help boost us in the algorithm. Just make sure you like and subscribe. We appreciate it. Even if you don't necessarily agree with us, I mean, just if you enjoy the content and enjoy going back and forth with us, please make sure to like and subscribe.
John, that's not a vaccine booster, right? That's the booster.
Yeah. No. So,
Make sure you know which booster it is.
Definitely not that. Do what you want. It's your life. I support my body, my choice. I support you. So, all right. Reckoning Cage. Never seen you before, brother, but really appreciate it. Donated $100 to the podcast. Very generous. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Please make sure you like and subscribe. I think the main point that gets missed, I think always, like we do get a lot of views. We get a lot of viewership across all of our social media platforms. When we look at our subscribers versus the views, and we look at our subscribers versus the amount of people that watch this show, the repeated return visitors to the show, it's literally only about 40%. Like 40% of the people that watch this show regularly actually are subscribed to it. And then even the guys that are subscribed to it, when I look at the show, we'll have 600 people on here, but only 50 likes. Before I started in the YouTube world, I was guilty of that. I never liked any of the videos. Now I like every video because I understand it helps us grow, both with getting higher views as well as grow financially as well. So now even if I watch something and I don't necessarily agree with it, I always click it. But obviously I'm sensitive to it now that we're running a YouTube channel. So if you guys could just do that and understand, even if it's just right at the beginning, if you could just hit the like button, we appreciate it. And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. I think the days of NYPD censorship on this podcast, I don't think they're necessarily totally over, but I think there's a lot more professional, less criminality in the upper echelon of the New York City Police Department than in the past administration. So I don't think you guys should be afraid to be subscribed to the podcast. Just be careful with the comments you're putting in here and stuff like that if you're still active on the job. So appreciate everybody. So Reckoning, thank you. Hardcore, always a friend. He says, quality, stamina-driven podcast with real insight as usual. Great job, fellas. Guys, got anything for Hardcore? He's always donating to the channel.
Hardcore, man, we appreciate it. You went to your variable supplement. I guess we're starting to go into tax season. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Hardcore, always, being part of the engagement on the chat. We really appreciate it and really dip into your pocket. It means a lot. Thank you very much for your generosity.
Yeah. We always appreciate it.
Upstate Detective, he says, good morning, brothers. The chief is a disgrace to all of us who have worn the uniform. The reality of it is like, we know you're obviously talking about the Minnesota chief that was sitting next to Jacob Fry, but it could have been anybody in the last 10 years. I mean, and that's really the sad part of it. You could just take that chief and just place him in any major big city and say that chief is a disgrace to all of us who have ever worn the uniform. And unfortunately, that's what's happened, right? The people that are leading the police departments and our most storied police departments have really disgraced not only their office, the badge and the uniform they wore, and have made a lot of us be embarrassed about the jobs that we either once did or still do. I speak to cops every day, and a lot of what I hear from a lot of the senior guys is, I'm embarrassed. I got to tell you, I'm embarrassed about what's going on. I'm embarrassed to even tell people I'm a cop anymore. And it's a sad state of affairs. And that directly falls on the leadership. Hardcore again. He says, I'm late to the show. Happy Friday. All have a great weekend to everyone. Please go back and watch when you get time or listen, whatever you do. I thought it was a pretty informative show. I think we really nailed around all different points on it. And again, I don't think you're going to get the type of analysis here that you're going to get anywhere else. And I don't think you're going to get the type of where we actually bring in the opinions of others that don't agree with us, and in a fair and civil manner, and let them debate their points. So we got formerly known as Gang. He says coffee and donuts for the boys, courtesy of Riot Detail Season. Unfortunately, that used to always be in the summer, right? We always had like detail seasons. You knew it was coming, like as the spring would come into the summer, and then it would tail off again, right? And we wouldn't have detail season. That has changed in police departments throughout the entire country. Detail season, riot season is all year round now. When we were talking about titling the episode, we titled it George Floyd 2.0. Unfiltered, analyzing the Minnesota shooting, was the use of force justified? But Marlon had said summer of love, and then he bounced off that and said winter of discontent. And really, it's just riot season, or it's riot season, but every season's riot season. What's riot season? Spring, summer, winter, fall. I mean, does anyone disagree with that at this point? I mean, there's zero break if you're in law enforcement today.
True. Yeah, clearly. It's 24/7, especially in New York City. I mean, New York City, as I said before, has always been a platform for protest, but now these protests are always teetering on riots. I mean, if you work in housing, anyone here active or retired, if you work in housing, especially in the Bronx, I mean, it's riot season when you just make an arrest quite often. So now cops are dealing with that, and they're just dealing with these paid activists that just have a complete agenda. So yeah, welcome to New York City.
Yeah. I find it curious that every time, personally, every time I'm looking at the state of like the markets and Wall Street and the economy, riot season always pops up. And also they tell you, some mysterious flu-like symptoms are returning all of a sudden. And it honestly, it's getting tiring, especially since we've been going through this ever since 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. Fox, where you from again? Oh, I think Brooklyn. Super sticker. Thanks for the donation. Appreciate it. We got Crazy 10-7. He says unapologetically subscribed from day one. Thank you. We appreciate it. That's because you are a rugged individual. That's why. If you weren't, you would go along with the masses, right? So
thank you to masculinity. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Coffee and donuts.
Yeah. Sleepy Joe's. He says, don't want to miss the coffee and donuts train. What do you guys think about Zohran? Think is Zohran's max bench the bar? I honestly think, just by watching him struggle significantly with that 135, I think he's never really sat under that bar ever. So I think if he had the bar, you would see like.
But John, he could push a car
up. Like when I was like 12 and I first started lifting weights, like that's. Can't really get that 45-pound bar, but I have a pink girl bar over here, Rogue bar, nice bar. I have it for my wife, and then once my daughters get a little older, I want them to start using it too. So I recommend to Zohran to start off with that 35-pound bar. Should even you out, so you can get like some muscle benching in there. Really important as you get older, Zohran.
Yeah, I love the guys that can't even bench 135 pounds, like Zohran Mamdani, who could just bench a pool noodle. Always the guys that, why did the police just take him down and put him in handcuffs? Like, no shit, that's what they are trying to do. But people just don't put their arms behind their back. But Zohran Mamdani, who can't lift 135 pounds on ice, he could push a car. He could push a car on ice, but can't bench 135 pounds. I know. It's okay, Zohran. You were under pressure that day. You were on camera. That's why. I'm sure on any given day, you could probably lift 136 pounds. I'm sure.
Yeah. And then, and I don't even care if he could bench 225 pounds, 225 pounds, or 315 pounds, and then really get up there. Like, what he should be doing is getting up there to where he can lift all that weight, which is like in the 0.0001% of the world, right? And then actually go out and try to have to apply that to wrestling with someone and watch yourself get your ass handed to you by a 135-pound guy who can't bench nearly as much as you. And so then you'll understand what you're really up against when it comes to law enforcement. It's a really nuanced profession. I always say, like, law enforcement, if you're out there in the world, whatever you're doing today, you're working, you're shopping, you're sitting home, you go for a walk. As you're walking, there's about 8 million data points happening, car driving, guy parked, guy walking, lady walking a dog, person talking on the phone, right? There's all these data points out there in the world. And most people could only focus on very few, 2, 3 data points, where police officers are expected to catch all of those data points, process them perfectly, and act perfectly throughout all of them. And so law enforcement is really the hardest job in the world, in my opinion. And it's really, and I'm not saying it doesn't deserve the scrutiny that it gets. It does. With great power comes great responsibility. Shout out Stan Lee. Stephen S. mentioned it on here. That is the Spider-Man quote. But it really is true. And then to watch people that understand nothing about what a police officer deals with, what their brain deals with, the stresses they deals with, what it feels like when your adrenaline is flowing and you don't have the option to turn around and run. And then to sit there and watch it and be treated as if it was the easiest thing. So easy to throw touchdowns Monday morning, not so easy to do it Sunday in the afternoon though, when a linebacker is coming at you. So, and then just another big shout out to Reckoning Cage. He another $20 to the podcast. We appreciate you, brother. He says cigars on me, gents. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Listen, one day, I promise you, and Eddie West and Reckoning, we'll have a Finest Unfiltered event, and maybe we'll do a cigar event one day when we get to that point, when we have enough funding to do it, we will do it and invite our guests and our friends that have really supported us. So that day will come. Thank you. And yeah, Stephen S., thank you so much for your contributions. I know you put out a book yesterday. I got to go back to it. There was a book. I was going to write it down that you referred. If you could refer to it again, I'm going to check it out. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Any more coffee and donuts?
No, I think that's it, fellas. Marlon, you got anything before we wrap up?
I just wanted to talk quickly about this and how hilarious this is. Yeah.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah. Apparently, I'm gonna have to register my 3D printed, and I'm gonna need a license from license division. Yeah. So this came out yesterday. Basically, Governor Hochul, they want to restrict 3D printers in New York. And they basically want you to have a license for a 3D printer, and they want the software in a 3D printer to be able to restrict you from printing a firearm in 3D. Now, this is funny because we've been talking about this for quite a while, that this was coming. And it's funny that we joked back then, what are you going to do? Make the 3D printers illegal? Well, yeah, apparently, right? So it's pretty hilarious that we're at the stage, and the fact that technology is kind of advancing at such a point where it's in a way it's actually bringing that rugged individualism back, and they're at the same time these people all want you to be using like a cell phone and all this technology, but at the same time they don't want it to empower you as a citizen. Okay.
And don't make memes. Don't make fun of them either.
Yeah. It's true. They want you using AI because all the big corporations, it benefits, but they don't want you to use it to benefit your individual life and make you become a rugged individual. Okay. And that pushback and that dichotomy is I find hilarious. And I don't know what they're gonna do here, because this future where you can make any firearm in your basement is coming. So what are you going to do? You're going to limit the free speech? You're saying, and she mentions in here, they want to limit your ability to share the file to print a 3D firearm, and which is a problem because, again, First Amendment, okay? I can look up a diagram on the breakdown of any firearm I want, and if I'm good enough, industrious enough, I could turn that into a CAD file, and then 3D print portions of it if my 3D printer can do it. So what are you going to do? Limit the First Amendment? Or are we going to limit your access to information on the internet? And unfortunately, I think the latter is coming, and we're going into a very, very curious point in history. And you guys all have to wake up and pay attention to this, because, again, a lot of the technology they want you to use, like the internet, can be used to empower you. But that's the exact opposite of what they wanted to do. They wanted to keep you in a cage and keep you dependent and dependent on collectivism while getting rid of, again, that rugged individualism. So I thought this was funny.
That's right. And you know what, Marlon? Where does it end? Like, at what point? So we're going to need a license for the 3D printer. What's next? Are we going to put restrictions on the materials that you could put in the printer? Like, we're going to stop the plastics and the materials that you buy. You got to get a license for those too. Like, where does this end? So, you know, some people may laugh. Well, you know, especially people that are anti-gun. Oh, you can make firearms with it. But what if you want to just make anything other than firearms? And what about the materials? We're going to put sanctions on those too. Like, where does this end? I mean, this is just getting more control and more control on your life. And as I often say, civil liberties and safety are not opposites. They coexist. But this is just absolutely ridiculous. This is not radical. It doesn't even make any sense. And this really just infringes on people's rights and privileges in this country. This is ridiculous. It's just another indication, and it's reflected that New York City is a prison. New York City is not America. It's communism. If you want to go to America, you need to go to places like Florida, New Mexico. You need to get Texas. But this isn't America. This is anti-American.
Yeah. One quick thing. So they want us all to have robots soon, right? But just think of it. If I could afford the robot and I say, you know what? I don't want to live in the city anymore. I'm going up in the sticks. And I'm gonna use my robot to help me build a cabin in the sticks. Isn't that a problem for them? Because again, you're getting off of the government dependency track and you're becoming an individual, okay? And that's going to be a problem for them because they want you to use the robot, but they don't want you to use the tech to become an individual. So let's see where this is headed to.
No, it's absolutely insane. I think the craziest part on this is, like, look, I was on a podcast the other night, and they were like, one of the hosts was like, look, I'm worried for New York City in a year. I think within a year we fall to communism. And I'm like, I like almost spit my coffee out because I'm like, you don't think you live in communism right now in New York City? Like, they don't believe in the First Amendment. They don't believe in the Second Amendment. They already showed you that. They locked your businesses down. They kept your children from learning. They kept you from running your business. They kicked you out of your profession if you didn't do what you were told. And they did it for over a year. And then what happened? The person that you blamed for the mass destruction on the economy in New York City, Governor Cuomo, and the countless death, not only in nursing homes, but in people in outpatient facilities and other people that would have never died if we would have just kept all of these outpatient facilities open and allowed people to live their life. You all sat there and cried for him to be the mayor of New York City. You begged for him. You begged for him. You don't think you live in communism? And now here's New York State. Listen to this line right here. This should send chills down your spine. This is 2026 book burning. Here you go. You ready? It would also establish criminal penalties. Oh, could you put that back up, Marlon?
Sorry about that. Yeah.
It would also establish criminal penalties for the sale, distribution, or possession of digital instructions for manufacturing 3D printed firearms. So think about how insane this is. They're telling you that if you have digital instructions that you can make a 3D printed firearm, that's a crime for you. But I could have it written in a book as per the law, right? I can have it written in a book. I just can't have it digitally. That's insane. Why can't I have it? What if I want to just read about it? Because I'm curious about manufacturing a firearm. I'm not allowed to do that as an American. What else could we do that? If this is allowed to be done here, and I'm sorry, in the Second Amendment, I don't remember reading anything about you can't have digital instructions to 3D print firearms. I don't remember reading anything about you can't 3D print firearms. I mean, that's the thing here. We've so far as such, like I often say about my own religion, like we're such soft Christians. We have no idea the real founding of our faith. But like when we talk about the nation, it's the same exact thing. We're such soft patriots. Like we have no idea. And we're so scared to say what the founding of the Second Amendment was for. The founding of the Second Amendment was not for you to hunt. It was not for you to be a recreational gun owner. It was not for you to engage in target practice. The founding of our Constitution and the reason the Second Amendment was written into law was that if the government becomes tyrannical, you as a rugged individual had the right to say, absolutely not. This is the line in the sand. You've converted and perverted our justice system to the point no longer we will take it. And you're either going to step down and we're going to right the ship, or we're going to overthrow you. And that's what that Second Amendment means. And New York State knows that, and they're trying to take your ability away to do that. And everyone across this entire country, Democrat, Republican, leftist, liberal, I don't care what you are, you should be pushing back at that, because every example of what happens when people are unarmed happens, genocide follows. So sorry, this is America. You don't like it? Get the F out.
Yeah, I'm with you. The American way. This country was built on culture of guns to protect ourselves and to protect ourselves from tyranny, which is the whole sense behind the American Revolution. And we're actually trying, these communist cities throughout this entire country, which are democratic cities, are trying to tail us back to pre-American Revolution times and bring us back under tyranny. So that's what the Second Amendment for. Exactly that. Not to shoot targets, not to shoot bears, and not to go out deer hunting to have fun, but it's actually to keep government in check. It's another check on government. So yes, shout out to America. This is absolutely ridiculous. That's why I said, what's next? You're going to put sanctions on plastic materials because the plastic materials are going to go into these 3D printers. I mean, you see it right now. Plastic bags. It's on everything. Sanctions, controls, restrictions. This is not a place we want to live. When you start putting sanctions on civil liberties, you're not making things safer. You're actually making them more dangerous, because now people will try to figure out how to circumvent this. And the only ones that will have the weapons in their hands is violent criminals, where it's good, obliging citizens are the only ones that follow these draconian rules. So anyway, shout out. We appreciate it. 3 hours and 25 minutes into it. I want to thank everyone. Like, share, and subscribe. As John said earlier, if you could throw a boost in there, not into your body, but if you could throw a boost into social media and into this platform, we appreciate it. Let's all grow together. So our success of growth is your success also. You are a huge part of this. And right now we just don't have the funding for it. But one day when we do have the funding behind us, we will be able to show some gratitude and have a nice party or function of cigars together. So we appreciate it, and actually learn the names and faces behind some of these handles. So thank you so much. And even haters and trolls, you're welcome too. But some of these haters and trolls, like 9 Inch Nails, you know what? Drop some coffee and donuts. You spent the entire time, you spent your day with us. At least drop some coffee and donuts. Anyway, here's one more. Jason, $1.99. Keep calling out the berry pickers. Thank you so much. We appreciate it, brother.
Yeah, guys. Thanks
All
for
right,
joining us today.
He says 11:29 Eastern Time. John, Eric, and Marlon are going to get notified at the end of the show to report to Left Rack for cause Dole Test. Podcasting enhancement drug is suspected. Yeah, absolutely. It's mushroom coffee, baby. Doesn't taste.
I hate that mushroom. It's terrible.
Doesn't taste great, but gets the job done. No.
We're fired up today, Pat.
Yeah, dude. Pat, thank you so much. And Pat said he's not cheap, by the way. It just won't allow him to put coffee and donuts. Pat's all good, brother. We appreciate it. But please, if you're watching the Finest Unfiltered, do not listen to John. I'm not going to sponsor mushroom coffee. That thing is terrible. Get a real cup of coffee. So when you give us coffee and donuts, you're not giving us mushrooms. You're giving us real coffee. So shout out to you. Thank you. We appreciate it.
All right, peoples. That's it. We'll be back at you Monday morning. Have a great weekend, everyone. Stay safe out there. And remember, when there are armed law enforcement agents with arrest authority on you, keep your hands and don't move. Yes, sir. What do you need? Okay, yeah, no problem. Fight it out in court. Fight it out in court. Don't be an idiot. Don't get yourself killed.
Is that the message for today? Don't be an idiot. Don't be stupid.
Don't get yourself got. That's it. Finest Unfiltered. We'll be back at you. See you Monday morning.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?